There are many myths around arguably the greatest structure ever built by humans, the Great Wall of China. Some say it's so grand that it's visible from space. Others claim that you can see it from as far as the moon. Other theories suggest that the builders of the wall were left inside. Well, sorry to disappoint you, but all these impressive stories are just myths. But even with those stories busted, the Great Wall of China is an impressive and truly breathtaking structure. So let me tell you its true story. Today, China is one of the most populated countries in the world, counting as many as 1.4 billion residents. It's also one of the oldest nations in the world. It has 3,500 years of continuous written history, but the civilization existed long before that. There is a theory that while the European continent, for example, was most likely reached by humans from Africa, China wasn't populated by settlers that came from somewhere else. Some people believe that the Chinese civilization got formed from local Stone Age people who lived on the territory since the prehistoric period. So now, the Great Wall of China. It's truly big even by today's standard, stretching for over 13,000 miles. To imagine it better, it's almost 5 times the distance between New York and Los Angeles. Or even a bit greater than the distance between the North and South Poles. Even in modern times, people have never built anything close to this big. Of course, it didn't take a day to build the Great Wall of China. 2? Keep going. In fact, the wall was being built for centuries. Maybe you know that ancient cities had walls around them to protect themselves from invaders. Yes, Chinese cities had them too. The first Chinese emperor united the country in 220 BCE and got a brilliant but very ambitious idea to turn all city walls into one big wall that would defend the country's border against attacks from the north. A trusted general directed the construction, enrolling a big group of workers, soldiers, commoners, and convicts. Back then, the wall was built of rammed earth and wood. In some places that were strategically important, the sections of the wall overlapped to provide maximum security. The walls were around 26 feet high on average. But the Great Wall didn't yet look like the construction we know today. Every next emperor would pick up the big wall project, strengthening and extending it, repairing, but also modernizing construction techniques. Some used bricks to build it. Others moved on to granite and marble blocks. Watchtowers and platforms weren't there from the beginning as well. They were added by Ming emperors. The watchtowers made it possible to communicate with other parts of the wall through smoke and fire messages. So, the wall is quite inconsistent in terms of material, but it only adds more charm to the construction and shows how much effort and time it took. The reasons why some parts of the wall have been standing for centuries and are still in good condition is glutinous rice flour. Turns out, this sticky rice mortar is almost like cement. It's very strong and waterproof, sealing the bricks so tightly together that even sneaky weeds can't grow between them. You may also notice that some bricks have writings carved on them. They were left by the workers who were building the wall. The purpose of those writings is quality assurance. They contain such information as location, quantity, and responsible officials. So, in the case of some problems with the quality of materials or constructions, it would be known who should be held accountable for it. Recently, a research group has looked through official historical documents of the Ming Dynasty that ruled China from the 14th to the 17th centuries. They came across records of secret doors in the Great Wall, so they decided to find them. They used a flying robot to capture continuous centimeter resolution photos of the wall. They photographed 90% of the wall that was built during the Ming Dynasty and discovered the remains of over 220 secret doors along the wall. Some of them have a specific width and height that allows only one person to go through. Others are large enough to allow 2 horses to pass at the same time. Why are the doors there? Well, the Great Wall's main goal was to protect the country from the enemy. Building doors that could let the enemy in would undermine the whole point of having a wall. So, of course, the doors were secret passages. They perfectly matched the surroundings topographically, and the exit on the outside was camouflaged with bricks so that it was almost completely indistinguishable from the brick wall. The wall was never just a defensive wall, and it was never completely closed. It could be opened on demand. It was also a structure used for trade and commerce, communication between inside and outside the wall, and of course, for defense and spying. Some doors were used for trade with the other side. Through smaller doors, a person would sneak out to spy on the enemy that lived on the other side. The hidden gates were also useful for a sudden attack. As you remember, some gates were camouflaged with brick on the outside. The exit was so indistinguishable that the enemy had no idea exactly where it was located. The inside entrance for Chinese soldiers was hollow, so they could walk through the wall and break the camouflaged exit gate from the inside, starting their surprise attack. Now, even though the main point was to prevent outsiders from getting into the city, the wall wasn't too effective on that matter. It could still be climbed over or marched around. So the wall was being watched at all times, and the guards gave signals to the troops if they saw the enemy approach. Also, the wall provided more time to mobilize and bulk up the country's forces or lure the enemy troops into a difficult strategic position. The construction stopped at the end of the 19th century. The wall lost its strategic and military importance due to technological advances. Over the centuries to today, only 8% of the Great Wall is in good condition, and the rest is damaged. Also, around 1/3 of the wall has disappeared without a trace, due to both natural erosion and human damage. I guess you could say it's now just a pretty good wall. As you remember, the first parts of the wall were built out of rammed earth and wood. These are not the most unfailing materials if we're talking about thousands of years. Also, destructive farming methods have turned large areas into a desert and contributed to erosion. Also, many bricks were taken away from the wall in the last century to be used in building farms and houses. The wall is being deconstructed stone by stone even today, but this time by tourists. Quite a few of them take a stone as a souvenir. That's a total of a lot of stones, considering that over 10 million tourists visit the Great Wall every year. Since 1987, the wall has been a UNESCO World Heritage Site, highlighting that it has an outstanding importance to humanity. The wall is one of China's 56 World Heritage Sites, second place among countries with landmarks protected by UNESCO. Who's first, you ask? Well, the top spot, with 58 World Heritage Sites, belongs to Italy. And do you know that the wall isn't only a famous tourist attraction, but also the location of the Great Wall Marathon? It's a marathon that was established in 1999 and is one of the most challenging ones in the world. You guessed right, people run along the wall, including all the steps. There are 3 distances, so that participants can run a full marathon that is 26 miles, a half marathon that's 13 miles, or just have a fun run of 5 miles. Hear that? Pretty annoying, isn't it? It's the sound at a frequency of 50 Hz. It's quiet but permeates everything around. What if this hum followed you wherever you go throughout the day, week, month, around the clock? You can't sleep, you can't focus or study or work. You want to scream in frustration, but the sound continues to torment you. That would be awful. Unfortunately, this nightmare is a reality for the residents of the Scottish Isle of Lewis. Day and night, about 200 people go crazy over a strange low-frequency sound. They say it seems to be pulsating, causing headaches, dizziness, and the feeling of an existential crisis. And no one can find its source. The islanders decided to create a special Facebook group to discuss the causes of the sound, share their experiences, and support one another. One woman says the hum is impossible to ignore. It sounds like it's shouting in your face, demanding your attention. For this reason, she hasn't been sleeping well for several weeks. I understand. The island administration, as well as the residents, are powerless to solve this problem. Now, the locals used a spectrograph to study the hum. The device showed that the sound had a constant frequency of 50 Hz. It spreads all over the island, but it doesn't originate from within it. This means the source may be far away from the shore. An underwater laboratory? Testing some kind of a secret invention? A harsh experiment on people? An unknown sea creature? Ooh. People develop a lot of theories, but nothing helps. The country's top leadership may be aware of the nature of this sound, but they probably don't want to talk about it. It sounds like nonsense, but let's visit the small northern Irish town of Omagh. Its residents reported a constant buzzing that prevented them from sleeping. They just woke up in the middle of the night and heard this hum. The sound spread in different parts of the city, and no one knew its nature. People heard the sound every night, but fortunately, the city council coped with the problem. They found the source of the hum, but for some reason, they refused to tell the residents about their investigation. Moreover, they said the sound could return in the fall. The locals demand the truth. There's a big doubt that they will get it. Another case of a strange sound happened in Windsor, Canada. It's an industrial town located across the river from Detroit, Michigan. Its residents have been hearing the hum for many years. It sounds at such low frequencies and is so quiet that some residents often cannot understand, is the sound real or is it a hallucination? Other locals say the hum is so strong that it makes glassware rattle in the cupboards. Some people believe that some secret invention used to control the weather produces this sound. But the reality may be simpler. The most plausible theory claims that the source of the noise is on Zug Island. Blast furnaces located on the island release pressure and produce a strong rumbling sound. This is necessary to keep the equipment from exploding. Well, yeah. According to this theory, the sound gets reflected from metal drums and machines and then goes beyond the island and crosses the Detroit River directly into Windsor. It sounds realistic, but no one has confirmed this theory. Yeah, there have been investigations. The Canadian authorities compiled a report, but it was kept secret. The only thing the locals received was an official comment on the city's website. Quote, "While it is not possible to extract the exact source of the hum, possible sources may include quarry activity or industrial ventilation systems." End quote. But where did the version about the blast furnaces come from? They were mentioned in an abridged version of this report without any details getting disclosed. Another problem with the hum research is that Zug Island is located on private American territory. Scientists from Canada were banned from conducting investigations there. Canada, Ireland, Scotland. Anywhere else? Oh, yeah. The residents of Bristol, England have been hearing a mysterious hum since the 70s. And not only them, maybe you, the one who is watching this video right now, hear it too. If that's the case, then you're one of about 4% of the world's population affected by this problem. No, seriously, what's happening? Let's figure it out. The first mention of the hum appeared in the mid-70s in England. A small digression. The Industrial Revolution also began in England. Keep this fact in mind and we'll come back to it later. So, people perceived the hum of Bristol like a quiet, annoying sound. But over time, it began to drive the locals mad, and of course, they demanded a solution to the problem. There were investigations that led to nothing. One theory said that it was the noise of industrial fans working in a warehouse in a neighboring city. But the warehouse has been closed for a long time, and the hum is still there. In 2015, scientists suggested that ocean waves could cause the annoying sound. When they collide with ridges and continental plumes, they release a sound wave, blah blah blah. It's too far-fetched. Other scientists have suggested that vibrations caused by volcanic eruptions and earthquakes are the reason for everything. It also doesn't sound plausible. About 8 million lightning bolts strike the planet every day. These impacts create an electromagnetic charge. This energy causes the air between the surface and the ionosphere to resonate, and nope, that's all wrong. Sea waves, earthquakes, lightning? Seriously? Then why do so few people hear the hum? No, there must be something else here. There are many theories, but look at the whole picture. What do you see? In Ireland and Canada, the information about the hum is classified. It appeared in England in the 70s, and there are no earlier records of it. What does this tell us? The nature of the sound is not related to nature. It's about people and technology. England became the first industrial country. In England, the sound appeared for the first time. If this phenomenon had bothered people before, we would have found some records. It means it may have an artificial nature. Why would they hide any natural phenomena from us? What if the annoying hum is the consequence of our technological advances? Factories, cars, power lines, cell towers, airplanes, microwaves, power plants, all of these clog the air with sound waves. It's possible that all these things cause the hum, but only some of you can hear it. Listen carefully. Perhaps there's a buzzing hum in your ears too. Ooh. But let's not panic and end our video on a more positive note. While in some places the mysterious hum drives people crazy, in others it becomes the cause of a real celebration. Welcome to the bayside town of Sausalito, in sunny, sometimes foggy, Northern California. In the 80s, a loud hum appeared here, which prevented people from sleeping. The investigation revealed that the cause of the hum was marine creatures. Thousands of toadfish swam to this place every year. These are fish that can emit unique sound waves. The human ear can't hear this sound from a single fish, but if there are thousands of them and they scream at the same time, then a whole town can hear their party. Sound waves come out of the water and reflect off the houses located next to the shore. From there, the waves spread further and can cover a huge territory. And that's what happened to Sausalito. Now, once people figured out the nature of the sound, they didn't look for solutions to get rid of it. They just decided to celebrate. The locals created the annual Humming Toadfish Festival, where they had fun and imitated the sounds of the fish. They dressed up as toadfish, toads, and other creatures. Unfortunately, the festival ceased to exist in 1990 because toadfish stopped coming to the city. They went to another place and only occasionally appeared on the coast. So there.
Archaeologists recently found something fascinating from a forgotten Maya kingdom, a tomb hidden in a collapsing pyramid. Inside, there was a king buried for 1,700 years, a jade mask that looks almost human, but not quite. And all this thanks to the looters who missed it by just 6 feet. They stumbled upon it in 2022 in the dense jungles near the border of Guatemala, Mexico, and Belize. In Mayan times, this little place used to be called Xochitlam. It's a lost city, half swallowed by jungle. This place meant pretty much nothing compared to other big Mayan cities, like Tikal or Teotihuacan, or so we thought. The team found a tomb of a Mayan ruler. The artifacts, the names of kings, all this revealed that Xochitlam wasn't just some tiny village. It was a pretty important place for that culture. And what they found inside that tomb may rival the treasures of any Maya metropolis. The tomb's ceiling had collapsed long ago, but the offerings were still inside and remained intact even after centuries. They recovered over 16 spondylus shells. These things were used by the ancient elite for power and rituals. That meant that whoever the tomb was related to, it was someone wealthy, of high status, who got themselves a ceremonial burial. Archaeologists also found carved femur bones. They were etched with hieroglyphs and names. Maya literally wrote their history in human remains. Researchers want to dive super deep and get a DNA analysis on the bones. Maybe that will help uncover familial ties, origins, or health problems these people might have faced. And most important of all, the mosaic jade mask. It was pieced together from luminous green tiles into an expression that feels almost human, almost alive. A lot of people were joking that it's just like Jim Carrey's mask in the famous movie. But it wasn't a magical artifact. That was the face of a forgotten Maya king, staring out at us after 1,700 years of silence. His name was etched into the femur bones, Itzam Kokaj Balam. Historians think this might be the ruler who reigned around 350 BCE. Unfortunately, this period is super underdocumented. We barely know anything about those times, but it looks like he was pretty important to the locals. One of the bones even showed a carved figure holding a deity's severed head. The deity's head looks exactly like the jade mask. Perhaps this was supposed to be the king himself, defeating some mythological villain. Other inscriptions mention the king's father and grandfather. That links Xochitl to the mighty Maya capitals we mentioned, Tikal and Teotihuacan. Tikal was once the beating heart of the Maya world. It was a fascinating megapolis. A city rose from the Guatemalan lowlands with towering step pyramids that scraped the sky. That place was home to tens of thousands of people. It was also a hub of art, astronomy, and culture. The rulers were worshipped almost as living deities. Their deeds were carved into stelae that still stand amid the howler monkeys. Teotihuacan was located even further north. Now that was a mystery of another kind. It wasn't really Mayan, but rather Central Mexican. But still, that was a true metropolis, one of the largest cities in the world during its time. It was most famous for its Avenue of the Dead and colossal structures like the Pyramid of the Sun. It was a rich cultural center that had a worldwide influence. For centuries, both Tikal and Teotihuacan seemed to have completely different cultures. Tikal was a flourishing city-state where people loved reading, astronomy, and beautiful architecture. Teotihuacan was a titanic militaristic superpower. Two big centers of Mexico, separated by 600 miles of jungle and mountains. Compared to these imperial capitals, Xochitl was a whisper. But it looked like this Itzam guy from the tomb wasn't just a ruler of a random village. He seemed to have political ties in ancient Mesoamerica. The craziest part is that we almost lost this piece of history, all because of the looters. At some point in the past, grave robbers had tunneled dangerously close. They stopped digging just 6.5 feet away from the tomb. That's just like in that meme with the diamonds. Sometimes you stop digging right before you hit it big. But in our case, thank heavens they didn't get there first. That's how close we came to losing a piece of history. In an almost poetic irony, it was the looters' tunnels themselves that led Estrada Belli's team to the site. Archaeologists have been looking around and using the so-called LiDAR technology. That's basically laser beams shot from high above, which help them map the spot. It's like taking X-rays of the jungle floor. And that's when they found the little signs of intrusion. They quickly realized that if someone was digging here, they were probably looking for something important. Without the failing looters, they might have walked past a discovery. In any case, archaeologists want to keep searching. They might even find more chambers buried inside the abandoned pyramid. We just keep finding mysterious things related to the Maya. Recently, buried deep within the ruins of Tikal, archaeologists found a house, and in that house, a limestone altar. It was covered in vibrant murals of red, yellow, and black. What's weird is that this build wasn't made by Maya. It was unmistakably Teotihuacan in style. And just like the tomb from before, it was made about 1,700 years ago. The altar was discovered inside a Maya-era residence known as Group 6DX7. It stood 3.5 by 6 feet right in the center of the home. That was very typical for Teotihuacan traditions. It bore a mural of the storm god. That was also a central deity in the Teotihuacan pantheon. But this altar depicted no kings and no rulers. That's very weird. As we said, Maya worshipped and honored their dynasties and political power, putting them pretty much everywhere, like some merch. But instead, this altar worshipped the deities alone, and it did so in the heart of Maya's main capital, Tikal. When archaeologists dived deeper, they saw it as unmistakable proof that Teotihuacanos not only came to Tikal, they thrived there. This house wasn't some trade outpost. People actually lived in it. Teotihuacanos built homes, practiced their rituals, and left their deities behind in this city. And Maya seemed to be chill about that. Researchers think this was a home for some elite people from Teotihuacan, or maybe it belonged to Mayans who practiced Teotihuacano culture and deeply respected it. But it might be something darker than a simple, friendly multiculturalism. The two cities weren't in the best relationship. There was some tension, maybe even surveillance. The house and the altar were probably built around 300 to 400 BCE. That was a period when Tikal was rising in power. This might have caught the attention of the mighty empire to the north. It's almost as if Mayans poked the beast. By 400 to 450 BCE, that attention may have become something sinister. The altar could have actually been the symbol of domination. Had the Maya of Tikal truly welcomed their guests, or did they come here and bluntly started building foreign altars in sacred spaces? Did Teotihuacan use this as some kind of soft invasion? In that case, it would make sense for Mayans to destroy that place or vandalize it somehow. Mayans regularly buried their buildings and rebuilt on top of them. But for some reason, this altar remained untouched. Mayans found it and buried it with the surrounding buildings as they were. No vandalism, no destruction, no rebuilding even. Looks like they had some complicated feelings about Teotihuacans. It was a time when cultures clashed, fused, overlapped, and possibly spied on each other. Perhaps one day we'll learn more about what really happened among these ancient civilizations.
On March 24th, European skies were dominated by a glowing, insane blue spiral. The eerie sight kept growing, expanding, almost like the whole Earth was about to get sucked into a vortex. And after a couple of minutes, poof, it suddenly disappeared. Even though it looked like some kind of extraterrestrial tech, there's actually a very human explanation behind it. Photos of this strange swirl started popping up all over Europe, with people sharing them from countries like the United Kingdom, France, Norway, and Germany. But if we really want to figure out what happened, we have to look all the way over to the United States. Turns out, on that same day, SpaceX's Falcon 9 rocket was launched from Florida at around 1:50 in the afternoon local time. So while most people in the US saw clear skies after the launch, it actually caused that strange anomaly in the European skies. And that happened because Falcon 9 is a reusable rocket. So, after launching into space, it releases what is called its payload. And by that, I mean whatever it is carrying, like a satellite. After completing its mission, the rocket itself turns back toward Earth. As it does, it ejects any leftover fuel, which instantly freezes due to the high altitude, forming a spiral pattern because of the rocket's movement. Light then reflects off the frozen fuel, making it visible from Earth. Basically, that's what the blue spiral was, leftover fuel released by the rocket in space. So, should we be worried down here on the ground? I mean, is it dangerous? Well, no. It's not like it was some kind of spacecraft accident. It's just leftovers and light. And this is totally normal for the Falcon 9 rocket. Even though it went viral this time, the same phenomenon was spotted about 4 years ago. Back then, people speculated all kinds of things, like a swirling galaxy moving across the sky, or even an unidentified, unexplained flying object. But nah, it was just one of Elon Musk's space toys. Speaking of which, his space agency is also behind another eerie sighting that's becoming more common. On clear nights, many people have reported seeing a strange string of lights moving quickly in a straight line, almost like a train of stars. Those aren't drones, and they're definitely not perfectly organized shooting stars. These strange lights are actually Starlink satellites from SpaceX. You know, that project that beams high-speed internet from space using thousands of tiny satellites, basically turning the entire planet into a giant Wi-Fi zone. But wait, satellites don't have lights on them. So how is it possible that they look so bright at night? Well, basically, what we're seeing is the sun reflecting off the satellites as they travel through their lowest orbit. And they're only visible if the sky isn't too bright. What's really impressive is that you can see this same event more than once on the same day. That's because Starlink satellites travel at a staggering speed of 300 miles per minute, and they complete one full orbit of Earth every 90 minutes. So, doing the math, that means you could spot those satellites within 2 hours of a previous sighting. Without a doubt, the beginning of the year was busy for skywatchers in the United States. In February, they got to see this stunning, cloudy jellyfish shape taking over the sky. What do you think it is? If you guessed another thing related to SpaceX, you're right. This is another art created by a Falcon 9 rocket. This time, it happened because the rocket was launched during the evening twilight. The light from the setting sun bounces off the rocket's smoke trail, creating this amazing effect. Now, let's move on to Italy, where another creepy event occurred. It was a stormy night, and suddenly, way up in the sky, a giant glowing red ring flashed for just a split second. Nope, it was not an extraterrestrial portal. This is something called an ELV. This happens when a powerful lightning strike sends out an electromagnetic pulse that hits the ionosphere, which is a super high up layer of our atmosphere. When this happens, nitrogen atoms up there get excited and glow red, creating a massive but super quick light show. Another red phenomenon happened in Scandinavia, but instead of a ring, it was more like a streak of light. This is known as a stable auroral red arc, or SAR. Despite the name, it's not an aurora. It's something much rarer. This phenomenon happens when the Earth's magnetic field, which acts like a big protective shield, gets disturbed. This disturbance causes some gas in the atmosphere to get super hot, thanks to a huge electrical current around the planet. What's weird is that only oxygen gets heated up during a SAR, which is why these light shows always glow that same red color. And fun fact, this event is more likely to happen after a big solar storm weakens Earth's magnetic field. It is impressive to see phenomena like this with the naked eye, but the view from outside Earth can be just as stunning. In 2022, an astronaut aboard the International Space Station spotted two bizarre blue blobs of light glimmering in our planet's atmosphere. They happened at the same time, but they weren't related at all. One of them was a massive lightning strike that hit right next to a large circular gap in the clouds. The lightning lit up the surrounding cloud walls, creating a glowing ring around the hole. Another one was caused by the moon. The way the moon was positioned made the sunlight it reflected pass through Earth's atmosphere, creating a bright blue blob with a fuzzy ring around it. And if you're wondering what that weird orange halo is, running parallel to the curvature of the Earth, I've got you. That's the edge of the atmosphere, also known as Earth's limb. And this is what it looks like when viewed from the International Space Station. In Canada, residents of central Alberta were looking up at the sky one night when they suddenly saw something strange. A bunch of vertical beams of light that seemed to be coming from the ground and reaching up into the blackness of space. It sure looked like something out of a science fiction movie, but this is actually just an optical illusion. Yep, it's a visual trick caused by some specific winter conditions. This phenomenon happens when light is refracted by ice crystals. Here's what's going on. When it's freezing outside, tiny ice crystals form in the air. These crystals are super thin and flat, so each one acts like a tiny mirror that reflects light sources positioned below it. Basically, the crystals reflect the light straight up, creating those glowing vertical beams. And it can be caused by any light source, like the sun or the moon. But in most cases, the sources of these light pillars is man-made, like car headlights or streetlights. Even though the phenomenon is completely natural, it rarely happens, and only in very specific situations. First, it has to be freezing cold. On that particular day in central Alberta, for example, the temperature was around minus 30 degrees Fahrenheit. Then, the weather has to be calm, with no wind at all. If a storm breaks out, forget it. You won't be able to see the light pillars. And don't mix them up with auroras, okay? Auroras are mostly seen in high-latitude regions, like around the Arctic and Antarctic. Since they happen way up in the atmosphere, they're visible over large areas. Light pillars, on the other hand, are more localized and concentrated in a much smaller area. But hey, no matter which one you spot, if you're lucky enough to see one of these amazing sights in the sky, you're in for a show you won't forget. Lake Michigan is one of the largest and most mysterious freshwater lakes in the United States. And now, deep inside it, scientists have stumbled upon something unexplainable. Vast, round craters scattered all across the lake's floor. It all started in 2022. A team of researchers wanted to map the lake's bottom and look for some shipwrecks. At first, they were sure it's going to be just some typical rocky terrain or sandy patches. But what they saw on their sonar screens stopped them cold. Strange circular shapes that looked almost too perfect to be natural. They were hiding about 500 feet beneath the surface, in places where the water turns dark and impenetrable. Those guys are huge, ranging from 300 to 600 feet wide. They also plunge nearly 40 feet deep. And there are dozens of them, neatly arranged like some footprints. But the team had no idea what these things were. Then, in August 2024, the mystery only deepened. Using a remotely operated vehicle, they got a closer look at these formations. There were about 40 of them. No one had ever seen anything quite like this before in the Great Lakes. What could have created those craters? Could they be ancient? Perhaps remnants of some geological event lost to time? If that's the case, it's weird how long these holes have likely been sitting there, undisturbed. Theories started popping up. One possibility was that they could be sinkholes, or dolines. Those are basically holes that suddenly appear in the ground when the surface layer collapses. The rock beneath the surface, often made of limestone, gets slowly dissolved by water over time, creating voids underground. When the surface of those voids can no longer hold its own weight, it caves in, and this forms a hole. Think of it like when you poke a straw through the lid of a drink. Sinkholes can be small dips or huge, spanning up to 2,000 feet. They can happen gradually or all at once. Sometimes they can swallow entire cars or even buildings. And Lake Michigan sits on limestone bedrock. It erodes pretty easily when water flows through it. Sinkholes like these have already been found in Lake Huron, and they look kinda similar. But there are some plot holes, no pun intended, with this theory. For example, it's wild how they all would be so huge. It's also weird and pretty rare for sinkholes to occur in a lake bed. They also kinda resemble a straight pattern. They seem to extend generally southward, forming a loose line, which is pretty weird. If these are sinkholes, then they're definitely not playing the usual geological rules. Though it might be some new, unusual process at play beneath the lake's surface that we haven't discovered yet. There's another theory though. Glaciers. Glaciers are wild rivers of ice. They covered much of the Earth during the last ice age, and they're incredibly powerful. While they might move slowly, sometimes only a few inches per day, they have such immense weight that they can reshape entire landscapes over thousands of years. Glaciers can grind and scoop the land beneath them. They're basically like colossal bulldozers. Their weight, combined with the slow but steady movement, grounds down everything beneath them: rocks, soil, even bedrock. This can create deep gouges in the Earth's surface, called glacial troughs. During the last ice age, there were lots of glaciers all over the northern US, including the Great Lakes region. If they moved across what is now Lake Michigan, they could have carved out these deep holes. Glaciers often move in a pretty straight path. As they move, they cause terrain to erode, but the resulting erosion varies based on terrain. Sometimes there are places where the bedrock is softer or fractured, and these places are more easily carved and crushed by the glacier. That could explain why some holes could be bigger and deeper than others. Harder bedrock is less affected. But usually this leads to rounded, crescent-shaped depressions known as chatter marks. Those marks are more like grooves rather than circular, big craters like those in Lake Michigan. Once the glaciers melted, the Great Lakes themselves formed. If the craters were formed by them, they may have filled with water, becoming part of the Michigan Lake. Though this theory is more like a speculation, so we need more evidence. But there's another layer to this mystery. The craters are not just curious geological formations. They actually may hold valuable clues about early life on Earth. Parts of Lake Michigan, especially dark ones, are relatively low in oxygen. It's like a lighter version of deep ocean environments that often have very little of this element. For example, hydrothermal vents deep in the ocean, underwater openings in the Earth's crust with some hot, mineral-rich water that are often very low in oxygen. But some organisms love places like these. For example, opossum shrimp. Teeny tiny shrimp-like creatures that love cold, deep waters. They get their name because they have a pouch to carry their young until they're ready to be on their own, like an opossum. Or deep-water sculpin fish, small bottom-dwelling fish that also enjoys cold lakes. They're well adapted to living in dark waters and usually stay close to the lake bed. And weird organisms like invasive quagga mussels, which kinda look like shells. These are small freshwater mussels that have spread there to the Great Lakes. They attach themselves to hard surfaces and can cause problems for ecosystems by competing with native species for food and space. All these guys could be in Lake Michigan, and even more. There might be microbes or even bacteria that are specially adapted to these harsh conditions, just like it was in Lake Huron. There's only a handful of creatures that could survive deep within these craters, and studying them could give us insight into how life once flourished in Earth's ancient, oxygen-poor oceans. That's because it's in places similar to these where some of the earliest life forms thrived. Early Earth had an atmosphere with little oxygen, although it was much more hot and ancient microbes adapted to this. The Great Lakes, especially Lake Michigan, have always had a bit of a ghostly reputation. Like even this mission was organized to study the shipwrecks. There were about 6,000 of them in the Great Lakes. Many of these wrecks are still sitting on the lake beds, preserved by the cold, fresh waters. And shipwrecks aren't the only strange things tied to the Great Lakes. Over the years, there have been stories of unexplained disappearances. Boats and even planes have vanished without a trace. The lakes, often calm on the surface, can suddenly turn dangerous with unpredictable storms and massive waves, leading to these mysterious events. Not even mentioning all the creepy stuff people noticed there over the centuries, such as ghostly lights above water or bizarre weather patterns like eerie, sudden fogs that seem to appear out of nowhere. In 2007, they even discovered some prehistoric structure that looks like Stonehenge there. Well, it was way smaller, but still. It lay about 40 feet below the surface in the heart of Grand Traverse Bay, and it's speculated to be about 9,000 years old, way older than Stonehenge. Looks like this is a print of those who lived in the area thousands of years ago. These massive stones are arranged in a careful, winding pattern stretching over a mile. They range in size from basketballs to compact cars. But one, in particular, stands out. A boulder 3.5 to 4 feet tall, 5 feet wide. It's etched with the image of a mastodon, a creature that roamed the Earth about 11,000 years ago before it went extinct. It probably sank there during the end of the last ice age we mentioned. This period had reshaped the region. This place is underwater now, but back in the day, it was still dry land. So the stones were probably created by people who lived there, though we're not sure why. Were they used as hunting blinds? Or was it some sort of an ancient calendar? Who knows? Only about 15% of the Great Lakes floors have been explored. Now, scientists are gearing up for a deeper dive into this mystery, both literally and figuratively. They want to analyze the lake beds surrounding the craters, hoping that maybe something in the environment around them might have caused them to appear. They have initiatives like Lakebed 2030. These missions should map the entire underwater landscape. This would help us learn tons of interesting stuff about Lake Michigan and our planet's past. Who knows what other secrets these dark waters hide? There are mysterious plasma bubbles floating around the pyramids of Giza. As bizarre as that might sound, let's get one thing clear right off the bat. There's nothing extraterrestrial going on here. Plasma bubbles are those weather anomalies that form in a layer of Earth's atmosphere called the ionosphere. This is an invisible layer surrounding our planet that stretches roughly from 50 to 400 miles above Earth's surface, right at the edge of space. In this layer, the sun, being the giant hot power that it is, basically cooks gases, splitting them into electrically charged particles called plasma. Here's where it gets interesting. At night, especially near the equator, these charged particles get disturbed, and when a bunch of them suddenly vanish at the same time, it forms what we call a plasma bubble. Imagine it like a big empty pocket where the plasma is missing or its quantity is lowered, but it's only considered a plasma bubble if this phenomenon occurs on a large scale, typically around 62 miles in size. If you're already packing your suitcase for Egypt and have put binoculars to look at the tips of the pyramids, I'm sorry to say that we can't see these plasma bubbles with the unaided eye. It's all happening way above our heads, completely invisible to us. Scientists need to use special equipment, like the Latitude Long-Range Ionosphere Radar, or LARID, to detect these bubbles. This advanced technology helps researchers track and observe the movement and formation of plasma bubbles in real time. This formation, by the way, can be triggered by solar storms. That brings us to November 2023, when an impressive solar storm occurred. On a scale from 1 to 5, this one was classified as a G3, which is considered a strong event. Solar storms occur when sunspots are basically cooler, darker areas on the sun's surface, release bursts of energy into space. These flares triggered several geomagnetic storms on Earth. While this might sound like doomsday stuff, it didn't disrupt our daily lives too much. In fact, it was great news for skywatchers, since the solar storm created stunning auroras, with the northern lights visible as far south as Greece and Turkey. But this particular storm in 2023 also had another interesting consequence. It caused the largest plasma bubble ever recorded by the Chinese radar. This phenomenon was so massive that it covered regions as far apart as the Egyptian pyramids and the Midway Islands in the Pacific Ocean. Now that's a huge distance, and it is a big deal for science. And that's because plasma bubbles are a growing threat to modern technology. Experts say they can disrupt satellite communications and GPS systems. So if you're using Google Maps or Waze and suddenly it can't figure out where you are, a plasma bubble might be to blame. Great. We now know what's going on with those bubbles, detected above the pyramids of Giza. But things get even weirder inside this ancient construction. Apparently, the Great Pyramid of Giza has the ability to concentrate electromagnetic energy within its interior. A couple of years ago, a group of researchers decided to see what would happen if they took this ancient architecture and hit it with radio waves. I mean, waves that are similar to the kind your phone uses, but on a much larger scale, up to 1,900 feet long. But since they couldn't just start blasting radio waves at the actual pyramid, they did the next best thing: computer modeling. Using these simulations, the researchers discovered something incredible. The Great Pyramid can actually concentrate electromagnetic energy within its internal chambers, as well as underneath its base, where an unfinished chamber is located. By concentrate, I mean something like trap it. For example, when you shout into a cave, you hear your voice echo back, right? The sound waves don't just disappear, they bounce around and get focused. Similarly, when radio waves hit the pyramid, they don't just pass through or around it. Instead, they get absorbed, bounce around, and focus inside and underneath the pyramid. Our list of mysterious phenomena surrounding the Egyptian pyramids doesn't end there. Inside the pyramid, there's a long, narrow passage that leads to what's known as the King's Chamber. This room sits at the center of the pyramid, and it's believed to have been the final resting place of Pharaoh Khufu, the ancient Egyptian leader who commissioned the entire thing over 4,000 years ago. When visitors step into the King's Chamber, two things normally strike them: the room's incredible acoustics and its heavy, imposing structure, which is entirely lined with red granite. Recently, scientists have started to connect these two facts. Some researchers now believe that the King's Chamber might be able to catch or pick up sound energy generated from other parts of the pyramid. In other words, this room might have been designed to amplify sound in a way that no other chamber in the pyramid can. To test this theory, researchers conducted an experiment where they sang in the Queen's Chamber, which is located directly below the King's Chamber. Here's where it gets wild. The music couldn't be heard in the lower underground rooms of the pyramid, but it sounded loud and clear in the King's Chamber. One possible explanation for this is the type of stone used in the King's Chamber: pink granite. Granite is known for its piezoelectric properties, meaning it can absorb energy from its surroundings, like sound vibrations, and convert it into electrical energy. This suggests that the chamber's unique acoustics might be due to more than just the shape of the room. It could be that the granite itself plays a role in amplifying and concentrating sound waves. According to scientists, these discoveries open up a whole new field of research into the pyramid's potential. Could the ancient pyramids have somehow harnessed the energy created by sound waves, or even Earth's natural vibrations? It might sound far-fetched, but considering the granite's piezoelectric properties are well documented in modern science, it's not entirely impossible. Who knows? Maybe we've only just scratched the surface of what the pyramids were truly capable of. Speaking of just scratching the surface, there's even more to think about, like how the pyramids ended up in such a perfect location. It seems the builders lined up the Great Pyramid with the cardinal points, meaning its sides are almost perfectly aligned with the four main directions: north, south, east, and west. There are many theories about how they did it, but one study suggests that Egyptians might have used the fall equinox to achieve this perfect alignment. During the equinox, the sun rises and sets directly in the east and west. It probably made it easier for builders to use the sun's position as a guide. By watching the sun during this time, they could make sure the pyramids were positioned just right. If we think about all these strange things about the pyramids, I mean their perfect alignment, the ability to concentrate radio waves, and the materials used in the chambers that might generate electrical energy, could the real purpose of the pyramids actually be much more complex than just being tombs? Well, Nikola Tesla thought so. It is said that the famous inventor and engineer was kind of obsessed with the Egyptian pyramids, and he wondered if they might actually be giant energy transmitters. He believed the shape and position of the pyramids could help them function as huge generators, capable of producing free, limitless energy. Some researchers agree with Tesla and believe that these massive monuments might have been designed as giant power plants. According to their theory, builders could have figured out how to move ions, those electrically charged particles in the atmosphere, by placing materials like copper, gold, and silver around the pyramids. So, it's definitely possible that the ancient Egyptians created a sustainable, renewable power source. Although this is a very interesting thought, we haven't been able to confirm this theory, and the true purpose of the pyramids remain one of humanity's biggest mysteries.
In 2011, scientists from Chile found a weird-looking fossil in Antarctica that looked like a squashed football. Almost 10 years later, the rock just sat on a shelf in Chile's National Museum of Natural History with no specific label. It went by The Thing in the museum because it looked like something from a science fiction movie. When the scientists finally got their hands on the strange fossil, it turned out it was actually a giant soft-shell egg from around 66 million years ago. This one is more than 11 inches long and 7 inches wide. A regular chicken egg is just 2.5 inches long, and an ostrich egg is almost 6 inches long for comparison. So, The Thing won the title of the biggest soft-shell egg ever found and the second largest egg of any animal we know of. The only bigger egg that was ever found was that of the extinct Madagascan elephant bird, which is also 1.5 times as tall as Michael Jordan. The bird, not the egg. The Antarctic egg is also special because it's the first fossil ever found in this part of the world. So, whoever left it there must have been one big creature, probably a giant sea turtle that lived long ago, like a mosasaur. This is surprising because most scientists thought these creatures didn't even lay eggs, so this discovery could change what we know about them. The egg is also unique because it has a thin eggshell and no pores, which is totally different from most dinosaur eggs. It actually looks more like the eggs of lizards and snakes, but it came from a giant creature related to these animals. No known dinosaurs or flying reptiles from that time and place were big enough to lay such a huge egg, so it must have been a mosasaur after all. But we can't be 100% sure. Scientists did a lot of work and studied 259 types of living reptiles, like lizards and snakes, and their eggs. From this, they figured out that the mommy who laid the egg was probably at least 23 feet long, not counting her tail. During the late Cretaceous period, this part of Antarctica might have been like a nursery. Paleontologists have found bones of tiny mosasaurs and plesiosaurs in the same area, along with bones from the grown-up ones. Archaeologists in Norway made another cool but literally discovery and found dozens of arrows that had been hidden in ice for 6,000 years. They were melting out of a large ice patch in the high mountains, covering an area of about 45 football fields. In 2014 and 2016, when the summers were extra warm, scientists went to an ice patch called Langfoni to look around. They also found lots of reindeer bones and antlers there. Some of the arrows were whole and some in pieces, along with 5 arrowheads around the melting ice patch. This is more arrows than have been found at any other frozen site in the world. Some of the 68 found arrows date back to the Neolithic period, and the newest ones are from the 14th century of the Common Era. Ice is like the perfect time machine that can preserve whatever ends up there in an almost perfect condition. Langfoni became famous as one of the first ice patch sites after a local hiker found a 3,300-year-old leather shoe right next to its edge. Scientists are studying places like this to understand how people used these sites and how the ice patches from Norway to North America changed over time. Now, once upon a time, around 32,000 years ago, to be exact, a squirrel buried some seeds near a river in Siberia. Am I the only one getting the Ice Age vibes? Anyway, these seeds belong to a plant with cute white flowers. Thousands of years later, a group of scientists found these seeds buried deep in the frozen ground, about as far down as a 12-story building is tall. The seeds were surrounded by ice and bones of animals like mammoths, bison, and woolly rhinoceroses. The mature seeds had been damaged, maybe by some squirrel, but some of the younger seeds still had good plant parts inside them. The scientists carefully took those out and put them in small containers to help them grow. And here comes the coolest part. They were able to grow the plants. Their flowers were shaped a little differently from the flowers of the same plant that grows today. After a year, the Ice Age plant even made new seeds. Based on this, the scientists suggested that permafrost could be a depository for an ancient gene pool, and we could find extinct species there and bring them back to life. Scientists on an icebreaker in Antarctica were looking for whales but found something way more unusual. The camera behind the ship, which is as heavy as a car, detected 16 million icefish nests on the floor of the Weddell Sea. The nests were located about every 10 inches in all directions and covered an area of 93 square miles, which is slightly bigger than the whole of Washington, D.C. The colony even had a distinct border, which was a line in the sand. The scientists were in the area because they were studying a special spot in the ocean where the water was a little warmer than the water around it. In this warmer water, they found tiny animals called zooplankton near the top. When the young icefish hatch, they swim up to this area to eat the zooplankton before going back down to the seafloor to grow up and have their own offspring. Since there was so much food, it made sense to see icefish in this warm water. But they didn't expect to find such a huge number of icefish nests, much more than anyone had ever seen before. New Zealand's Antarctic Heritage Fund found some old photo negatives in a hut in Antarctica. They turned out to be unique images from the Ross Sea Party. It was a famous failed expedition led by Ernest Shackleton. He wanted to become the first person to cross Antarctica by land, from the Weddell Sea to the Ross Sea, passing through the South Pole. But things went wrong when their ship, the Aurora, was blown out to sea. They had to use the hut from another explorer, Captain Robert Falcon Scott. His goal was to be the first person to reach the North Pole, but sadly, he didn't succeed either. The negatives were made of cellulose nitrate and were found stuck together in the small box. The Trust took the negatives back to New Zealand, where they carefully separated them and discovered 22 hidden images. Many of the photos were damaged, but the Trust could still recognize some familiar places around McMurdo Sound, a well-known area in Antarctica. No one knows for sure who took the pictures. In December 2021, some scientists noticed a strange mark on the Larsen Ice Shelf, a giant sheet of ice off the eastern coast of Antarctica. They thought it might be a river flowing under the ice, so they drilled down over 1,600 feet to check it out. They expected to find water, but they didn't expect to see that the water was full of fast-moving creatures called amphipods. The scientists also found that the water in the underground river had unusual layers of currents moving in different directions, which they still don't fully understand. Another surprising thing happened during their research. On December 20th of the same year, a volcano erupted far away in Tonga, and the pressure waves from the eruption were detected all the way down in the ice river in Antarctica. It shows how everything on our planet is connected, even in the most distant places.
People went outside and stopped in wonder. Some gooey stuff was covering the ground. Whitish, gelatinous blobs had turned the outside world into a scene out of a creepy sci-fi movie. This mystery evoked lots of discussion, and experts offered different theories. But it turned out that the situation was even worse than previously thought. The blobs reportedly made the people who came into contact with them sick. But let's start from the very beginning. It was the summer of 1994 in the timber town of Oakville when gelatinous blobs were found on the ground. People thought they had rained from the sky because where else could they have come from? This find caused panic and confusion among the residents of the area. But actually, it was just the first appearance of this gooey substance. Flecks of goo, which were actually smaller than a grain of rice, fell down from the sky several times. The volume was very high, and when they accumulated on the ground and shed roofs, they became visible. Around 10 days after the first occurrence, a newspaper wrote an article about the blobs. Other than that, there seemed to be no other confirmed and official reports about this mysterious substance. Until a National Weather Service employee in the area got a call from an unidentified man in August. The man claimed that some hot, metallic particles falling from the sky had burned holes in his kid's trampoline. Apparently, it was time to examine the Oakville blobs. A hospital reportedly looked at them under a microscope and made a terrifying discovery. The researchers stated that the substance contained human white cells. This encouraged some people to suppose that the blobs were probably concentrated fluid waste from an airplane toilet. This theory was debunked after a spokesperson of the Federal Aviation Administration explained that toilet fluids were usually dyed blue, which gave them the nickname blue ice. Another theory trying to explain the Oakville blobs suggested they had something to do with jellyfish. Some experts agreed that this idea was plausible. Something the size of portions of jellyfish could have been pulled up into the atmosphere and moved to another location during a storm. After all, raining animals is nothing new, but we'll speak about that later. At the same time, 6 events of the Oakville blobs raining down from the sky were reported, which made it hard to imagine jellyfish particles floating around in the sky for so long. On the 20th of August 1994, the New York Times reported that the mysterious gooey substance had once been alive. This article followed an analysis made by the Washington State Department of Ecology. The scientists who had tested the blobs announced that they had found out that the substance contained a number of cells of different sizes. Interestingly, those results brought an end to the human white cell theory, since it turned out that the cells didn't have any nuclei. But that's something you definitely see in human white cells and jellyfish as well. These creatures are multicellular organisms whose cells contain nuclei. But what kind of life wouldn't have nuclei? For example, bacteria and some other microorganisms similar to them. An expert working on this mystery said that the blobs had no clearly visible structure, and it didn't appear even when they used a microscope. In the end, the researchers concluded that the substance contained two types of bacteria, both found in the digestive tracts of humans and other mammals. They were also often found when waste was deposited. These bacteria could travel in the water and through the air. The goo could be some kind of a carrier system. Unfortunately, the scientists admitted that they didn't have any hard evidence to support their idea. To add to the mystery, the samples reportedly went missing before the researchers could finish their work. But is it true that the weird blobs made people sick? At first sight, yes. A few Oakville residents reported becoming ill and experiencing similar flu-like symptoms after touching the Oakville blobs. But was it a direct consequence? No one knows. Experts admit that the cases of illness could have been a coincidence, which makes the incident even more intriguing. So far, the mystery remains unsolved. Now let's move on to the other stuff falling from the sky. Bad news. Some of it can be totally disgusting. Like worms falling from the sky in China and wiggling on people's cars. Some people thought it was an animal rain, while others were not convinced. They stated that the video was fake since the worms were only on vehicles but not on the ground. Others were sure worm rains were a totally normal thing in March. Ugh, luckily not where I live. But the most shocking thing? Bizarre worm rains happened in the British Isles too. For example, in Scotland, kids were playing soccer when worms started raining down. The reason could be a substantial weather change, or who knows what. But the cases of animal rain actually started long ago. In 1877, an unusual tornado hit a farm in Southern California, bringing along several tiny alligators about 1 foot in length. In 1894, a tornado moved through England, dropping poisonous jellyfish on people's heads. Even though some witnesses claimed those were not jellyfish but tadpoles, the incident was still extremely strange. In 1876, in Kentucky, black humor rain was recorded. That was when chunks of meat fell from the sky. Now, let me tell you, if you're squeamish, you might want to skip this part. Okay, I've warned you. Locals claimed the meat tasted like mutton, but later, researchers discovered that buzzards flying over the area must have felt unwell and regurgitated their meal right in the air. Ew, told ya. All these are instances of the animal rain, a rare meteorological phenomenon in which flightless animals fall from the sky. Such cases have been reported throughout history, starting from 1794, when French soldiers saw toads fall to the ground during heavy rain near the French city of Lille. How do such rains occur? It might be different for different species. For example, frogs and toads often roam the countryside in large numbers. Powerful winds can pick them up and carry them for great distances. Or let's take fish. In 1861, there was a reported rain of fish in Singapore. And a naturalist speculated at that time a migration of walking catfish could be taking place. So the wind might have dragged them over land from one puddle to another, as if they had been following the rain. In any case, the most common explanation of such cases is that there is no actual falling at all. Animals are just driven along by winds or something of the kind. This can also explain why typically only one single species of animal is reported raining from the sky. Another probable explanation involves tornado waterspouts. Those are tornadoes forming over the water. A tornadic waterspout can potentially transport animals to relatively high altitudes and carry them to remote locations. This idea is supported by the suggestion that animal rains are often preceded by storms. At the same time, this theory doesn't explain why each incident involves just one species, not a group of similarly sized animals from the same habitat. Here are some other examples of animal rains. In 1947, fish started falling to the ground in Louisiana. And in 2005, it rained frogs in Serbia. In 2010, a small town in Australia experienced a rain of perches. These occurrences were most likely caused by tornadoes, lifting things from the ground and water and depositing them in totally different areas. Sometimes, even iguanas might fall onto your head. When it's really cold, they go into hibernation mode to survive. But even though they might look frozen, they're still alive. When it gets warmer, they start moving again. But unfortunately, while in that chilled state, they might fall down from trees, which is dangerous both for the animals themselves and for passers-by.
Strange explosions in vibrant blue colors are popping up around the universe and keeping astronomers intrigued. This rare and incredibly powerful event has a fancy name: luminous fast blue optical transient. This phenomenon doesn't behave like anything else we know of, and things got even stranger when the most recent one happened in a spot it shouldn't have. To really understand what happened last year, we need to go back a bit. This type of strange explosion was spotted first in June 2018. The blue blast happened about 200 million light-years from Earth and got the nickname the Cow. No, this happening didn't resemble a cow at all, but it did have an unusual format. Back then, this blast was the most asymmetrical explosion ever seen by astronomers. It burst into space in a flattened pancake-like shape, not in a typical sphere as they would expect. This phenomenon was similar to a supernova, which is the most common type of cosmic explosion that happens when a star exhausts its nuclear fuel and collapses under its own gravity. However, scientists also noted three crucial differences. Number one, this phenomenon is more powerful than a typical supernova. When it happens, the blue burst emits more energy than an entire galaxy of hundreds of billions of stars like the Sun. Number two, it's much faster. The explosion reaches its peak brightness and fades away within a matter of days, while a supernova can take weeks or even months to completely dissipate. And the last difference, these blue bursts can also be much brighter. These mysterious objects are considered the brightest known optical phenomenon in the universe. But unlike a regular supernova, it's believed that there are no radioactive elements to power this brightness. So that means the power must come from somewhere else. The question is, from where? This is just one of the mysteries that the scientists are trying to figure out. There have been some heavy investigations since the event was first observed, and 15 telescopes around the world are constantly looking for it. Since 2018, these extreme explosions have been spotted about once a year. So while they're rare, they're not incredibly uncommon. There are several possible explanations for the existence of these fast optical transients. Perhaps the most acceptable one is that it is a stellar corpse. I mean, what is left behind when a star calls it quits. So we're looking at two prime suspects here. They could be a neutron star or a black hole, producing emissions close to the speed of light. The theory goes like this. There is a massive star much larger than those that produce regular supernovas. Then it starts to collapse. Such an event would certainly be expected to leave a black hole behind. Let's say this massive star isn't ready to leave the universe in a quiet way. Instead, it creates a swirling disk around the black hole composed of gas, dust, and other matter, like it matters. This disk, called the accretion disk, can shoot out streams of material at incredibly high speeds, almost like powerful cosmic jets. And that could be exactly what we see as those sudden bursts of light. Again, it's just a theory. What exactly sets off these blasts remains a mystery. and much more observation and analysis are needed. Experts believe that explaining such an oddity is a scientific goldmine. After all, we're talking about a stellar corpse that isn't just sitting there, it's actually quite active. Now, since this event was first spotted, all similar occurrences that our telescopes have captured happened in the same place. I mean, the explosions always occurred in the spiral arms of different galaxies. But last year, things changed. The Hubble Space Telescope left scientists speechless in April 2023 when its images caught this same type of weird explosion happening for the first time in the middle of nowhere. Well, it didn't happen inside a galaxy as it was supposed to. It happened in the space between two of them. More precisely, about 50,000 light-years from a large spiral galaxy and about 15,000 light-years from a small one. This event is known today as the Finch. Oh great. So when we finally get closer to finding some answers, the unusual location of the Finch phenomenon came to mess it up again. So maybe there is another explanation for it. Speculation began soon after the discovery. One idea is that it could have been a collision between two neutron stars traveling far outside their host galaxies. These two could have been spiraling toward each other for billions of years, and when they collided, they produced a flare over 100 times brighter than a normal supernova. For this hypothesis to be correct, one of these neutron stars would have to be highly magnetized, amplifying the explosion. Another possibility is that the explosion was a star being torn apart by a black hole with a mass between 100 and 1,000 times that of the Sun. Although we still have lots of questions, one thing is for sure. The Finch is a luminous, fast black optical transient. Except for the weird location where it happened, it has all the other characteristics to be classified as one. It's super bright, like me, and super fast, and its origin is super hard to explain. Plus, the data from the Gemini South Telescope, the Chandra X-ray Telescope, and the Very Large Array Radio Telescope have confirmed it. Adding this latest information only makes it harder and harder for researchers to finally find some kind of pattern in this whole event. The Finch isn't the only peculiar event in this category. Let's head back to the year before, to 2022. A blue explosion was spotted in September, and it got the nickname of Tasmanian Devil. Just like the previous ones, this blue burst came up and disappeared very quickly. Then, something mysterious happened. Exactly 100 days later, observers who were still tracking the phenomenon got an early Christmas gift. They observed another flare-up, and it was as bright and fascinating as the original one. Wait, so we're talking about two similar and strange explosions that happened at the same spot and close in time? Well, this was a first. Quickly, 13 telescopes around the globe all had eyes turned toward the Tasmanian Devil event, including one equipped with a high-speed camera. Over the course of 120 days, they managed to capture another 14 irregular light pulses. This was certainly amazing because it proved that instead of showing up once and fading away as expected, the Tasmanian Devil continued to explode with supernova-like energies again and again and again. Can you imagine such power? This scenario still intrigues the scientific community because it pushes the limits of physics, not only because such extreme energy production, but also because of the short duration bursts. By the way, its flares last from 10 minutes to about 4 hours. Believe me, on the scale of the universe, that's considered super quick. This was the only time that an extended season of this event was observed. However, after some thought, the scientific community split their opinions about it. On one hand, the Tasmanian Devil could have been an utterly unique and one-of-a-kind event. On the other hand, maybe it was just the first time that our telescopes caught it from a more face-on angle. To further understand what's happening, scientists still need to observe larger samples of the phenomenon. All hopes are in the upcoming Vera C. Rubin Observatory, which is currently being constructed in Chile. it will have a 27.5-foot-wide telescope, coupled with the world's largest digital camera ever fabricated for this purpose. According to NASA, this technology might finally give us some answers about these blue explosions. We can expect some exciting times ahead, as this could be the start of a new chapter in our understanding of stellar evolution. The Milky Way galaxy, where we live, looks like a ginormous pinwheel rotating in space. It's a spiral galaxy that appeared around 14 billion years ago. It's filled with a lot of stuff: stars, nebulae, which are clouds of dust and gas, planets, asteroids, you and me and your parents and that messy kid down the street. You get the idea. And all these fan out from the center of the galaxy in long spiraling arms. A marvelous view. The Milky Way is about 100,000 light-years across, and it takes our Sun, along with all the solar system, 250 million years to make one revolution around the center of our home galaxy. Wow, that's a big lap. Look at the sky at night, and most stars you see there would be located in just one of the Milky Way's arms. Before telescopes were invented, people couldn't see stars clearly. They blurred together into a single white streak stretching across the sky. It looked like a river of milk, and that's how the name of our galaxy appeared. Now, let's get down to some recent and very exciting news. An international team of scientists have discovered something they've never seen before, hidden in the center of the Milky Way. It resembles Morse code. Is that our galaxy trying to communicate with us? In the early 1980s, astronomers discovered giant one-dimensional filaments dangling vertically near Sagittarius A star. That's our galaxy's central supermassive black hole. And recently, a new kind of such filament has been found. But they're much shorter and lie either horizontally or radially. In other words, they're spreading out like spokes on a wheel, going away from the black hole. Interestingly, even though both types of filaments do have certain similarities, researchers believe they most likely have different origins. The vertical filaments stretch through the galaxy, towering up to 150 light-years high. But the horizontal ones resemble the dashes and dots of Morse code. Scientists were beyond excited when they made this discovery, but they had to do a lot of research to make sure the structures indeed were what they looked like. They managed to confirm that the filaments were not random, but tied to the outflow of the black hole. Thanks to them, it became possible to study the spin of the black hole and the orientation of its accretion disk, a rotating disk of matter formed around the black hole under the influence of its immense gravitational force. But let's have a closer look at the filaments we've been talking about. There are around 1,000 vertical ones. They appear in pairs and clusters and are often either equally spaced or side by side like strings on a harp. As for their horizontal counterparts, they seem to be around 6 million years old. Now, both types of filaments are one-dimensional. They can be viewed with radio waves, and they seem to be tied to processes happening in the galactic center. That's it. The similarities end there. The vertical filaments are perpendicular to the galactic plane. The horizontal ones are parallel, but at the same time, they point radially toward the center of the galaxy and the black hole. The vertical filaments are magnetic. The horizontal ones seem to emit thermal radiation. The vertical filaments contain particles moving at speeds very close to the speed of light. The horizontal ones don't do it. There are way more vertical filaments, and they're much larger than those stretching horizontally, 150 light-years against 5 to 10 light-years at most. In any case, the new discovery is still filled with tons of unknown things, and astronomers are ready to start unraveling them. But the filaments aren't the only unexpected and bizarre phenomenon in the solar system. Some time ago, Australian researchers discovered a weird spinning object in the Milky Way, and it was unlike anything they'd seen before. This object released massive bursts of radio energy 3 times every hour. And even though there are other objects that switch on and off, for example pulsars, such frequent pulsation has never been observed before. Some astronomers admitted that this discovery was pretty spooky, since no known object in the sky could do it. Research teams started working on the discovery, and found out that the object is likely to be 4,000 light-years away from Earth. It's also super bright and has an incredibly strong magnetic field. And still, if you do all the math, not me, you'll discover that it isn't supposed to have enough power to produce such radio waves every 20 minutes. The theories about the origin of this mysterious object vary. Some experts claim it could be an ultra-long period magnetar, whatever that is. Others think it might be a white dwarf or the remnants of a collapsed star. But it also might be something we've never heard about, an entirely new type of object. But one thing is clear, astronomers managed to observe the signal across a wide range of frequencies, which means it has a natural origin and isn't something artificial. Now, there's another mystery about the Milky Way. Hey, what can I say? It's a mysterious place. Around 15 years ago, astronomers launched the Fermi Gamma Ray Space Telescope. Gamma rays are an incredibly high-energy form of light. That's why, when you observe the sky through the Gamma Ray Telescope rather than with your own eyes, the difference is dramatic. So, when astronomers started to use the telescope, they noticed that the center of our galaxy emitted much more gamma radiation than, for example, its outskirts. To put it simply, something is growing incredibly brightly right in the middle of the Milky Way. But the most perplexing thing is that no one has been able to find a plausible explanation for this phenomenon for almost a decade. Some astronomers suggested that the central region of the Milky Way was glowing with such intensity because the dark matter was getting destroyed there. While no one has ever observed dark matter annihilation, scientists have been hypothesizing about this phenomenon for a long time. Naturally, we wouldn't be able to see dark matter itself, but the process could be producing the radiation the Gamma Ray Telescope has spotted. That's how it could be happening. If particles of dark matter collided, just like ordinary matter particles do in particle accelerators, they would annihilate one another, and as a result, they would burst into a shower of other particles, including the ones that make up gamma rays. But that's where the problem lies. If the mystifying glow was created by the annihilation of dark matter, then gamma ray particles would get distributed evenly in space. Instead, they gather together in clumps. That's why, to the great disappointment of numerous supporters, the theory based on the dark matter came up short. There is an alternative explanation of why the Milky Way is glowing. The culprit might be a group of millisecond pulsars, which are neutron stars spinning incredibly fast. And when I say fast, I mean about 1,000 times per second. The theory that the glow is caused by millisecond pulsars is quite plausible. As I mentioned before, the light coming from there is clumpy rather than smooth, and it often happens when the source of light is one individual object, such as a pulsar. Several studies have concluded that, due to the nature of the light, millisecond pulsars are the best explanation for this phenomenon. However, many scientists are still not persuaded. Those stubborn folk want proof, right? Well, first of all, they state that the clumps of light may appear due to the interaction of gas between stars and cosmic rays. Besides, the pulsar theory has one more catch. Why would so many of them be clustered together in a perfect sphere around the center of the Milky Way? Probably the clusters of stars that orbit the Milky Way could have been disrupted by the galaxy's gravity. As a result, these spilled stars, including pulsars, later formed a spherical shell around the center of the Milky Way. But, in fact, the whole picture looks like something completely different from both pulsars and dark matter. It leaves scientists with more questions than answers, and all that's left to do is a lot more research and testing.
Some mistakes have the power to change the course of history. One such story has to do with an old, boring key that could have saved the Titanic from its infamous demise. The key belonged to the crow's nest locker that housed binoculars, which could have helped the lookouts spot the iceberg sooner. There's more. The key wasn't even on board the ship when it set sail. The second officer took it with him when he was taken off the ship at the last minute. As the story goes, the officer forgot to hand the key over to his replacement in his hurry to disembark. So, when the lookouts were in desperate need of binoculars, they were out of luck. One of the lookouts, named Fred Fleet, even testified that if they had had binoculars, they would have spotted the iceberg in time to avoid it. And when asked how much sooner, Fleet replied, "Enough to get out of the way." In 2015, some auctioneers got their hands on Blair's key and presented it as one of the most important artifacts from the Titanic. They truly believed it could have saved the ship. Blair kept the key as a souvenir and passed it down to his daughter, Nancy. At one point, it was up for auction with a price tag of over $80,000. Blair himself was quite the hero, it seems. A year after the Titanic disaster, he was awarded a gallantry medal for saving a crewman who had fallen overboard while he had been on board the liner Majestic. He may have forgotten a key, but he sure didn't forget to be a hero when it counted. This next story is both funny and tragic. It's about NASA's lost $125 million Mars Climate Orbiter. The spacecraft engineers failed to convert from English to metric measurements before the craft was launched, and as a result, they lost it. The navigation team at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory used the metric system of millimeters and meters, while Lockheed Martin Astronautics in Denver used the English system of inches, feet, and pounds. JPL engineers mistook acceleration readings measured in English units of pound-seconds for a metric measure of force called Newton-seconds. What's worse is that none of JPL's quality control procedures caught the error in the 9 months it took the spacecraft to make its 461 million-mile flight to Mars. That's a long time to be lost in translation, don't you think? The miscalculations were enough to throw the spacecraft so far off track that it flew too deeply into the Martian atmosphere and was destroyed when it entered its initial orbit around Mars. It's embarrassing to lose a spacecraft to such a simple math error. And it's hard to think of another example of such a large loss due to English versus metric confusion. Ever heard about the mathematical mistake that led to the discovery of the New World? Spoiler alert, it involves a guy named Christopher Columbus and a really big globe. Back in 1492, Columbus set sail from Spain with a mission to find a new trade route to Asia. He was convinced that he was less than 3,000 miles away from Japan, and just a bit more sailing would get him to the Indies with all their tasty spices. The only problem was that Columbus was a bit off in his calculations, like way off. He made a mistake in estimating the size of the globe, which led him to believe that Earth was far smaller than it actually is. Now I know what you're thinking. Wasn't Columbus afraid that he would fall off the edge of the world? Contrary to popular myth, Columbus and his crew knew the Earth was a globe, just like the ancient Greeks did 2 millennia earlier. They weren't worried about falling off the edge, but rather about the size of the ocean they planned on crossing. And to make matters worse, Columbus had no idea that an unknown landmass existed between Spain and Asia. After weeks at sea, Columbus finally reached the Caribbean. He believed that he had landed on the outskirts of Asia, and so named the islands the West Indies. He went on to explore the Caribbean and the northern coast of South America. But here's where things get really interesting. Even though Columbus insisted until his last day that he had reached Asia, another Italian explorer named Amerigo Vespucci mapped the eastern shore of South America down to Brazil and proved conclusively that Columbus had actually discovered a whole new world. A German mapmaker saw Amerigo's maps and labeled the new landmass America after him. And since his maps were super popular at the time, the name stuck. One man named Alexander Fleming stumbled upon one of the most significant medical discoveries of all time by accident. At one point in his career, Fleming observed the demise of many people from uncontrollable infections. Antiseptics were used to fight this, but they often did more harm than good. In 1922, while he had a cold himself, Fleming transferred some of his, nasal discharge to a petri dish and left it on his cluttered desk. When he finally examined it weeks later, he found that an enzyme had some antimicrobial properties. It wasn't until 1928, when Fleming left an uncovered petri dish next to an open window, that he stumbled upon the discovery that would change the world. The dish became contaminated with fungus spores. And when he examined them under the microscope, Fleming discovered that the bacteria near the fungus were dying. He managed to isolate the fungus and found that it was effective against numerous things that caused diseases. And thus, penicillin was discovered. As Fleming himself put it, "I did not discover penicillin. Nature did that. I only discovered it by accident." Talk about a lucky break. In the early 1520s, the east coast of the United States of America was a big mystery waiting to be solved. The Spanish found Florida, and the English and Portuguese found Newfoundland, but the area in between was like a blank spot on the map. France decided to take action and sent an expedition to explore the area. They chose a guy called Giovanni da Verrazzano to lead the trip. For this expedition, he got 4 ships. Unfortunately, 2 of them were shipwrecked, and a third one went home after doing some other business on the Spanish coast. Only the flagship, La Dauphine, crossed the Atlantic with Verrazzano and his 50-man crew. Verrazzano set sail from Madeira and landed at Cape Fear. From there, he sailed south, but got a little scared of running into the Spanish, so he returned somewhere north of Charleston. He anchored not far from his original landing spot, but unlike other explorers, he preferred to anchor well out at sea. He did send a boat to the shore, and he met the natives. They were described as wearing just some animal skins covering their bodies and garlands of bird feathers. As Verrazzano sailed along the coast, he reached the outer banks of North Carolina. He thought that the waters he discovered were those of the Pacific. In reality, what he'd stumbled upon was the Pamlico Sound. He thought that North America was just a long, extremely narrow strip of land. This mistake led mapmakers to show North America as almost completely divided in two. Moving on, Verrazzano reached a beautiful place that he called Arcadia, probably Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. Sailing further north, he missed the entrances to Chesapeake and Delaware Bays because he kept quite far from the coast until New Jersey. Then, the moment we've all been waiting for, Verrazzano discovered New York Harbor, and he anchored in the Narrows. Later, it was named after him, and now it is spanned by the Verrazzano Narrows Bridge. Once Verrazzano's sea appeared on the map, it became widely accepted and impacted loads of future explorers. For example, Henry Hudson went looking for a passage to the Pacific in the middle latitudes of the continent. But, as it turns out, the Englishman never did find the Pacific Ocean anywhere near Virginia. And the cartographic myth eventually faded away. It's funny to think about how a mistaken belief could have such an impact on history. When you look at the night sky, it seems like there's not much happening up there, and that the stars always twinkle at the same spot. For thousands of years, researchers followed the idea that the lights in the sky were unchanging. Sailors guided their ships using fixed stellar patterns. There are also the exact outlines of constellations we observe today, and astronomers identified them a long time ago. It seems impossible that one day we wake up and simply can't see some stars anymore. Or does it? A team of researchers at Vanishing and Appearing Sources During a Century of Observations, or VASCO, studied the sky to check how things with the stars are going. The astronomers got the data from Gaia, the European Space Agency, and compared the information from 70 years ago to that from today to see how the sky has changed. To test it right, they had to use both modern and old telescopes. And something really interesting happened up there. over 700 stars from the old maps were missing. If one star disappears, multiple theories could work, but it's harder when hundreds of them vanished at the same time. Could it be that the data was wrong, or these stars were too faint to detect? Nope, they quickly eliminated this option because these stars had clearly been part of their earlier observations. So, the first thing that comes to mind when talking about how stars disappear is that they reached the point where they ended their lives. You can have the most massive stars of all, and we're talking about those that are way heavier than our sun, and they go through sudden changes as they get to the end, which we also call a supernova. It's a powerful explosion that later shines for many, many months, and it's still visible even across hundreds of millions of light years. But that's the point. You see the traces, unlike here. Could this be a failed supernova? That means maybe one of them collapsed but turned into a black hole and consumed the remains from the inside out without causing a powerful explosion. But no one's been mentioning any signs of a black hole being active anywhere near those stars. And what if the stars had become less visible because of dust or gas around them? This is something that can easily happen, as interstellar dust and gas do block our view of objects that are far away. But there were no traces of unusually high concentrations of dust or gas. Nothing destroyed them either. Researchers would have seen traces if something like that had happened. Plus, these missing stars were not all in the same area, which means there probably wasn't just one fatal thing that made them all disappear. Also, the stars were not at the same stage of their life, so it's not an option they were all accidentally close to their end. They weren't particularly old or young, and they were on different levels in size and brightness. At some moments, it even seemed these stars haven't vanished because of some natural events. Maybe it was something related to other civilizations that might be somewhere out there in space. Maybe that's one of the ways to look for them. We could stumble upon some secret civilizations from other planets if we carefully observed the behaviors of stars, especially those we can't explain. No one knows what exactly happened with the missing stars, and unfortunately, right now, all we have are these theories. But you have to admit, they're cool though. Maybe it's just some kind of optical afterglow caused by gamma-ray bursts, or maybe even fast radio bursts. Fast radio bursts are powerful pulses of radio waves. They can release more energy in a couple of thousandths of a second than our giant sun does in almost 100 years. We don't really understand how these energy eruptions work yet, so we don't know what they can do. But still, hundreds of stars at approximately the same time. There are between 100 to 400 billion stars in our galaxy, so we'll probably see some of them disappear too. Hopefully, we'll understand better why such things can happen. Of course, scientists are not sure about this number because we can't see all of the Milky Way stars from our home planet. Some are too faint, some are too far, or even hidden by dust or gas. But they assume these numbers based on the size, shape, and likely mass of the Milky Way. And out of billions of stars, there are a little over 9,000 of them we can see with the naked eye. If you want to see more, you need a good telescope that will reveal those fainter ones your eyes are unable to discern. Many of the stars we see in the night sky are probably not alive anymore. Stars are giant balls of gas that produce light and heat through nuclear fusion in their cores. However, stars also have a limited lifespan, and eventually, they run out of fuel and stop shining. When a star passes, it can either become a white dwarf, neutron star, or black hole, depending on its size. Scientists have discovered that some of the stars we see in the night sky are too old to still be shining. This means that they may have faded, but we are still seeing their light because it takes so long to reach us. Actually, we may be looking at the past when we look up at the stars. Check out all of the stars you can see with your bare eyes. They lie within about 4,000 light years of us. That means what we're seeing are stars that appeared 4,000 years ago. Most of the stars we know of exist within galaxies. which are massive collections of stars, gas, and dust held together by gravity. Still, there are large areas of empty space between galaxies too. And the question is, could they have any stars? It seems that these areas of space are not completely empty. There is still some gas and dust, as well as dark matter, which is a type of matter that we cannot see but we know exists because of its gravitational effects on other objects. Scientists have even discovered a few isolated stars in these areas of space. These stars didn't form there. They ended up there by accident, which means they have probably been ejected from their galaxies by gravitational forces or collisions with other objects. And there could be more of these stars than we realize, but they are simply too dim to be seen from Earth. Stars don't actually twinkle. It's more that we just see it like that from the Earth. It seems like they twinkle because of the turbulent atmosphere of our planet. The light from a star must pass through many layers of the atmosphere. Not every layer is equally dense, so this causes the light to slightly deflect and change in color and intensity. There's one star named Sirius that sometimes twinkles, sparkles, and flashes so much that some people even tend to report it as something extraterrestrial. This is because Sirius is very bright and is often low on the horizon, which means it experiences more of these special effects of the Earth's atmosphere. When in space, astronomers and astronauts who observe stars from there don't see them twinkling. Hey, want to hear something cool? Me, you, your friends, the rest of humanity, we're all made of stardust. The elements that make up human bodies and all life on Earth were formed inside stars. The building blocks of life, such as carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen, were created inside stars and were eventually released into space when the stars were gone. These elements then became part of new stars, planets, and eventually life on Earth. The iron in our blood was created in the cores of supernovas, which are massive explosions that occur when stars fade. Some say that even the calcium in our teeth and bones is likely to come from exploding stars. The oxygen in our lungs was created in the cores of massive stars before being released into space through supernovas. Back in the 1800s, a bunch of super old artifacts with some weird symbols on them were found on Easter Island. You know, that tiny island you might have heard of, with the gigantic statues called the Moai. These symbols seem to be some kind of writing, but nobody's been able to figure out what they mean yet. Some scientists even think that if we crack the code, we might finally uncover the secrets behind the downfall of the ancient Easter Island society. So let's put on our detective hats and get to work, shall we? This mysterious script is called the Rongo Rongo. It was discovered by a Frenchman in the 19th century. He stumbled upon 26 wooden tablets covered in weird hieroglyphs during his trip to the island in 1864. The locals seem to have drawn pictures of animals they had never seen before on the tablets using sharp stones and gave each one a unique name. He thought they were pretty cool and suspected that they might be a remnant of some ancient writing system. Another fun fact about Rongo Rongo. It's a word that comes from the local language of Easter Island, and it means to recite, to declaim, or to chant out. The wooden tablets on which these glyphs were found might not have been in the best shape when they were discovered. Some were weathered, burned, or damaged. The glyphs were also spotted on a Birdman statuette and 2 other ornaments. These words were written in between lines on the tablets. Some of them were even ridged, with the inscriptions falling within channels created by the fluting. The images themselves are shaped like humans, animals, plants, and geometric shapes. Quite a diverse group. And here's something interesting. Every symbol with a head is oriented with the head facing up, either forward or to the right. The orientation of the writing is itself weird. According to a local tradition, the tools used to make the carvings were obsidian flakes, or small shark teeth. Deciphering these glyphs has proven to be a bit of a head-scratcher. 3 big barriers make it tricky: the limited number of texts overall, the lack of illustrations and context to help us understand them, and the fact that the language used on the tablets is not well known. Some people even think that these glyphs aren't real writing, but more like fancy symbols that don't have any real language behind them. It was also suggested that they might have been used as a sort of memory aid, or just for decoration. The way they're so carefully carved into the tablets makes it clear that the people who made them wanted to get a message, whatever that is, across. We'll probably never know whether that message was just for funsies, or to pass down important stories from one generation to the next. Researchers have been struggling with this ancient script for a while now, but it seems they've made some progress recently. They took a look at the tablets using all sorts of cool techniques like radiocarbon dating, and found out that they were made between 1810 and 1870 from local wood. One tablet, in particular, was in pretty rough shape, but the scientists created a 3D model and managed to spot some hidden glyphs that weren't visible before. One researcher said they found some grooves that were probably used for writing, just like drawing lines on a blank piece of paper to make sure your writing is perfectly horizontal. Another super mysterious script that scientists have yet to decipher is called the Indus Valley script. It's made out of a bunch of symbols that were used by the ancient Indus Valley civilization, but specialists are not entirely sure what their purpose was. For starters, the symbols are crazy short, so it's hard to figure out if they represent a full language system. Also, there's no other similar writing to compare it to. Various inscriptions from different periods also show that it hasn't changed much over time. Some folks think it might not even be language related at all, while others think it could be part of the Dravidian family of languages typical of South Asia. Linguists have also been working for centuries trying to figure out the mysterious hieroglyphics left behind by the Maya on monuments, pottery, and bark paper books. As we decode more and more of these ancient symbols, we're gaining a deeper understanding of the Maya civilization's social and historical aspects. For the longest time, many scholars thought that the Maya script wasn't even a language at all. Who can blame them though? Those glyphs are seriously complex and visually striking, but thanks to the groundbreaking work of a skilled ethnologist in the 1950s, we now know that the script is phonetic. It's a way of spelling words where each letter represents a sound you make when you say it out loud. As more and more linguists started taking an interest in the script in the 70s and 80s, it became clear that it was a fully functioning writing system that could express any spoken sentence with clarity. There's still a lot of decoding left to be done though, with countless carvings and inscriptions still waiting to be deciphered in jungle ruins and museum closets. There's no telling what other secrets we might uncover about this fascinating civilization. Back in 1908, an Italian archaeologist went on an adventure through the ruins of an ancient palace on the south coast of Crete. Among the dust and ashes in an underground depository, he stumbled upon something pretty cool, a golden-hued disc that was almost intact. This disc has become one of the most famous mysteries in archaeology history. It's called the Phaistos disc. It's a big clay plate that's covered on both sides with a spiral of weird stamped symbols that circle clockwise towards the center. These symbols are pictograms that show all sorts of things, like a person walking, a tattooed head, a helmet, an arrow, manacles, cats, eagles, and more. But here's the kicker. Nobody has been able to translate the symbols. Since then, many scholars have made attempts to decipher the code, but no luck so far. It's thought that the symbols might be part of Linear A, a script unconnected to any known language, but some experts suggest it could be syllabic writing related to various other languages, like Homeric Greek or Indo-European. Thousands of years ago, there was a mysterious European culture called the Vinca culture. These folks were so cool that they even had their own writing system, which is still one of the earliest known in the world. But there's a catch here too. You guessed it, no one has been able to decipher their script yet. The Vinca culture thrived thousands of years ago, and they were located in today's Eastern European territory. They got their name from the village of Vinca. which was only a small distance downstream from Belgrade on the banks of the Danube River. A team of Bulgarian archaeologists found recently a 7,000-year-old inscription covered in Vinca script. It's the oldest find of its kind in Europe. These symbols were carved into a ceramic tile, and researchers believe they carry information about the local calendar and important events. The Vinca culture was seriously advanced. They even knew how to write on wet clay using a sharp object. It doesn't seem like much these days, but it's a lot to expect from people who lived thousands of years ago. The Voynich manuscript also caused quite a debate between linguists and historians. Is this old book proof of a long-forgotten civilization, or just a clever prank? This manuscript is full of text that even the smartest code breakers haven't been able to figure out. Written way back in the 15th century, it was discovered by a book dealer named Wilfred M. Voynich back in 1912, hence the name. If it's a trick, it's truly convincing. The handwriting is beautiful, and there are even patterns in the text that match up with other languages. The theory of parallel worlds has been discussed in the scientific community for a very long time. Unfortunately, we're not developed enough yet to prove or disprove it. But it's still an interesting theory, and that's why we have a lot of unusual urban legends about the guests from a parallel reality, according to many. Let's check out a few of them. A man from a non-existent country. This story took place in 1851 in a small German village, Frankfurt an der Oder. A lost man came out to the local villagers asking for help. The man introduced himself as Jopar Voren. He spoke very poor German and had a very strong accent. The man himself claimed that he speaks Laxar and Abram, languages that don't actually exist on our Earth. He claimed to be from Laxaria, a country on the mainland called Sacria, separated from Europe by a huge ocean. However, none of these places existed on the Earth's map. People sent Jopar to the local authorities. He talked to a psychiatrist, but the doctor concluded that the man was totally sane. An investigation by the local police also revealed nothing suspicious about him. Jopar Voren claimed that the purpose of his visit to Europe was to find his long-lost brother. He survived a shipwreck and found himself near the village. They showed him a map of the world and a globe and asked him to indicate the place where he crashed, but he didn't recognize anything familiar. He seemed to have extensive knowledge about his homeworld. Jopar named 5 main continents on it: Sacria, Aflar, Astar, Auslar, and Uplar. His story was considered plausible. Scientists from Frankfurt decided to send the man to Berlin for further research. However, during the trip, he had something like a seizure. The man suddenly jumped out of the carriage and disappeared into the surrounding forest. Despite a long and thorough search, no traces of Jopar were found. He seemed to have disappeared as mysteriously as he had appeared. Inspector Leboeuf, who was assigned to escort him to Berlin, thought this man could be a being from another world, and that he had returned from where he had come from. Lady on Highway 167. This incident happened on October 20th, 1969. It was first reported in 1988 in the magazine Strange. The article tells about 2 men, LC and his business partner, Charlie. The names are fictitious. One afternoon, LC and Charlie were driving along Highway 167 in southwest Louisiana. Discussing work, they drove toward the oil center of Lafayette. The highway was empty at first, but then the men noticed a very old and very slow car ahead. The men started discussing this mysterious car. Such cars hadn't been produced for several decades, but this one looked quite new. The men thought it was thanks to the owner's care and admired it. They slowed down to get a better look at the car. LC noticed a bright orange sign on it that said 1940. They saw a driver. It was a young woman in old-fashioned clothes, a hat with a long feather and a fur coat, even though it was warm outside. There was a child next to her, also dressed in a warm coat and a hat. LC and Charlie wanted to talk to her, But then they noticed the expression on her face. The woman was looking around in panic, almost on the verge of crying. LC called out to her and asked if she needed help. She nodded, and he gestured for her to park on the side of the road. But when the men also parked, they suddenly noticed that the woman's car had disappeared. They looked around the highway in shock. She couldn't have gone somewhere far so fast, but the car was nowhere to be found. After some time, another man drove up to LC and Charlie. He saw everything that happened and claimed that the car had simply disappeared. The men talked about the incident for several hours. When they reached the city, they contacted the police. However, the police couldn't help them in any way. Apart from their words, there was no confirmation of the existence of the car. The case was discussed for a while in local newspapers, and then was forgotten. The Gadianton Canyon Incident. This incident occurred in May of 1972 in southeastern Utah near the Modena Railroad crossing on the edge of the Escalante Desert. Jenna North was driving her father's 1971 Chevrolet Nova. Her friend, Carol Abbott, was in the passenger seat. In the back seat, there were two other girls, Lisa Rockford and Bethany Gordon. It was after 10 p.m. when the girls crossed the Utah-Nevada state line. They wanted to get back to campus before their housekeeper, Mrs. Mortensen, locked the dorm doors. This stretch of Highway 56 in Utah is pretty deserted. There's nothing there but sand and a few plants. The girls were very happy when they finally noticed the Union Pacific Railroad crossing in Modena. But right behind the railing, Jenna noticed two highways. One went into the desert, and the other to Gadianton Canyon. The girls decided to take the road to the canyon. They thought it would be a shortcut to campus. The other girls were chatting with each other when Jenna noticed that they were no longer driving on asphalt, but on white cement. "Watch out!" suddenly shouted one of the girls. The road ended abruptly at a high rock wall. It was a dead end. They had to go back the same way they came here. And while Jenna's friends were complaining that now they would have to sleep in the car, Jenna saw that the landscape had changed dramatically. They weren't in the desert anymore. Instead, the canyon turned into an open area with wheat fields, pine thickets, and a small lake ahead. A full moon was shining in the sky, which was strange because it shouldn't have been there that night. The girls had no idea where they were, so they just drove to the light ahead. It was some building that they thought was a diner or restaurant. The girls saw a bright neon sign, but none of them could read what was written on it. These symbols were unlike any language they knew. Suddenly, several people came out of the building. They seemed shocked and frightened by Jenna's Chevrolet. They waved their hands and shouted something, but the girls didn't understand them. Lisa decided to ask the men for directions. She stuck her head out of the window and immediately let out a terrifying scream. "Get out of here!" she shouted to Jenna. The Chevrolet sped away from the building. Bright headlights illuminated their car from behind. They were being chased by a few vehicles. These vehicles were egg-shaped, had 3 wheels, and made a buzzing sound. The road ahead led back to the canyon. Jenna didn't have time to slow down and crashed right into it. The vehicles had disappeared, together with an unfamiliar landscape. The girls were back in the desert again. Fortunately, none of them were hurt, physically. But Lisa was in a state of shock. She was saying again and again, "They weren't human!" The girls had to help her walk. An hour later, they were able to stop a Utah Highway Patrol car. They told the police their story. The details of the report compiled by the police officer were complicated and confusing. During the investigation, the police couldn't figure out from the tire tracks exactly where the car went astray. The tracks ended very abruptly, as if the Chevrolet had suddenly disappeared. The police couldn't explain how the car could have driven 2 miles without leaving any traces, especially on such solid ground. There are still disputes about this story, but in the end, all versions and explanations of what happened are just guesses. Perhaps we'll never find out the truth. These were the urban legends about interdimensional traveling. Of course, there's no proof that any of these stories are real. Often the truth turns out to be very mundane. For example, the famous man from Taured, who people also called a guest from another reality, turned out to be a simple fraudster named John Allen Kuchar Zegras. But even so, these stories are still very interesting.
The dark days are mysterious natural phenomena that have occurred only a few times in the history of humankind. We can write them off as eclipses or just some weather events, but in reality, they're very creepy and we have no idea why they happen. So, what are these dark days anyway? What's so strange about them? Let's try to find out. The sun is off. What are we gonna do? That's what the residents of Yamal, Siberia asked meteorologists on September 18, 1938. In the morning, instead of going to work, they all gathered at the weather station. They were waiting for answers. All because on that day, they observed something inexplicable, an eclipse which they later nicknamed the Black Day. And neither astronomers nor meteorologists can explain what happened back then. Here's how one of them described this event. At 8:30 a.m., we noted a decrease in light. At the same time, the color of the clouds began to acquire a yellowish-brown, sometimes red-brown hue. By 9 a.m., the lighting had changed dramatically. It was as if you were looking at the world through a dark light filter. The brown tones of the clouds intensified. By 10:30 a.m., the sky and Earth didn't differ from each other in lighting and color. Everything seemed homogeneous, black, absolutely devoid of light. Pretty creepy, right? And that's not all. The city was also plunged into complete radio silence. Meteorologists couldn't even contact the authorities, and local residents were unable to set up any stations. Everyone was in the dark, both literally and figuratively. Meteorologists decided to try and launch several flares. The flares soared into the air towards the heavy dark clouds hanging over the city and disappeared. The clouds were so dense that the flares were completely invisible. At the same time, the weather was perfectly fine. Everything was quiet. And this black silence lasted for about an hour. After that, the Black Day ended as unexpectedly as it began. Even more baffling, those strange clouds left literally no trace. No rain, no dust, nothing. After that event, researchers found out that the Black Day had spread for 125 to 155 miles around. They also learned that the dark band was moving from west to east. After passing through the southern part of the Yamal Peninsula, it headed on for a while and then disappeared completely. Yamal isn't the only place where this phenomenon occurred. In fact, similar eclipses have been happening in different parts of Earth for many years. For example, in New England, on May 19, 1780, people there witnessed an event that was later called New England's Dark Day, but it lasted not one day, but several. A few days before this event, the sky turned yellow, and on May 19th, in broad daylight, it suddenly turned black. Here's what one of the witnesses, Joseph Plum Martin, later told the press. It was very dark. People had to light candles in their houses to carry on with their usual business. The night was as uncommonly dark as the day was. The smell of soot reigned in the air. Nearby rivers were covered with a thin layer of ash. When the real night came, people noticed through the clouds that the moon had turned dark red. Only a couple of days later, people were finally able to see stars through the veil of clouds. And then, everything suddenly returned to normal. No one had any idea what had happened. 22 years later, on June 2nd, 1802, a schooner named El Dorado sailed across the Pacific Ocean. Suddenly, they were overtaken by complete darkness. There was no storm, and the ocean was completely calm, but the whole sky was covered with black clouds. These clouds dissipated after half an hour and left no trace. And again, 74 years later, one of the dark waves happened in Wisconsin on March 19, 1886. It was 3 p.m., and this time, the wave was very short. It lasted only 5 to 10 minutes. A sudden night fell on the city. Frightened horses were neighing, and terrified people were running around, trying to find a place to hide. When everything calmed down, local newspapers reported that the wave passed from west to east. There was no solar eclipse, no winds or hurricanes, nothing that could cause the darkness over the city. And finally, once again, it happened on December 2nd, 1904, in Memphis. Or rather, that's what rumors claim, since there's no scientific evidence of this event. It was clear and cold dawn over Bluff City. People were doing their usual Friday morning chores. Then, around 9 in the morning, without any warning, the sun suddenly disappeared from the sky. It took only a minute for the bright sunny day to turn into pitch darkness. People interrupted their work, and children in schools were completely terrified. And just like in previous cases, the weather was perfectly calm. It lasted for about half an hour and then suddenly ended. A little later, following a mysterious eclipse, a ferocious storm hit the city. So, what's going on? All these strange cases can surely be explained scientifically, right? Well, actually, scientists don't have a definite answer. All these events are very similar, but we don't have a single explanation that could cover them all. Let's take a look at some theories. The first thought that comes to mind, it's probably a partial or total eclipse. But no, this is not the case. There were no eclipses on those days, and even if we consider this theory, before any eclipse, the sky darkens gradually. Eclipses themselves only last a couple of minutes. Certainly not a few hours or even days. Also, unlike eclipses, these events were local to specific cities. Well, maybe it's some other astronomical event. Some scientists believe that during the event on Yamal, a band of cosmic dust touched Earth, but later they found out that no astronomical bodies approached the planet that day. Alright, any other ideas? Forest fires could be the reason. When a large area of forest is burning at the same time, a column of air can rise to great heights, like 3 to 4 miles. These airflows carry ash and other burnt stuff to different places, and since all these things are so high in the sky, they simply freeze there and turn into something resembling black clouds. That was probably the case for New England. At that time, a wave of forest fires broke out in Canada. They could easily spread through the north of the US. Also, just look at this description. Yellowed sky, the smell of soot, ash on the water. Everything sounds logical, but this theory of fires only works for the event in New England. What about the other cases? Where would you find a forest fire in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, for example? Alright, moving on. Scientists tried to explain the story from Memphis by saying it could be a hurricane, but the black cloud swept through the city before the storm, not during or after it. And it wasn't some kind of typical storm cloud, it was full-fledged night darkness. So what's really going on? Now, meteorologists call this phenomenon a local decrease in the transparency of the atmosphere. Unlike solar eclipses, this darkness is denser. It also covers only a small area. The transparency of the atmosphere is its ability to let through radiation and light. It's basically, how well can I see distant objects? Everything can get dark and blurry, for example, because of the dust in the air, volcanic eruptions, fogs, and so on. So, according to this theory, dark days are just an extreme drop in the transparency of the atmosphere. But it's still strange. If that's the case, shouldn't everything have been covered with thick fog or something like that? Yeah, it was very dark, but when people lit the lamps, the visibility was pretty good. Nothing blocked the view except the black clouds that covered the sun. In other words, this phenomenon is very hard to explain. As far as we know, it happened only 5 to 6 times in the history of humankind. If there were other cases, they weren't documented. This phenomenon is impossible to predict, and no one knows how it worked, as well as where and when it will happen next time. And although there are many hypotheses, none of them can be verified. Maybe if these events happen again in the future, we'll be able to study them better. But unfortunately, at the moment, the dark days remain a mystery. Do you have any theories or ideas on this stuff? If so, write them down in the comments.
On August 2, 1996, huge, mysterious patterns appeared on an agricultural field in Chiselden, England. No one knew what kinds of symbols those were and who left them. As soon as the local news reported this, people immediately began to make their guesses. The most popular version was a message from a civilization living on another planet. The first crop circles appeared in the 70s in many areas across the US and England. Some compared these symbols to the writings of the ancient Maya. Others thought those were messages about the approaching apocalypse. But few doubted that their authors were from another civilization. But that geometric pattern in Chiselton was different from all the others because of an event that happened 8 years later. In 2004, a man from New Mexico found a strange stone 11 miles from Roswell. The rock had the same pattern on it as the crop circle in Chiselton. It's worth noting that Roswell became a famous place after, according to rumors and legends, a spaceship from another planet crashed there. Therefore, when the farmer found the stone and posted its photo on the internet, many people thought it was part of that spaceship. The stone was perfectly smooth, and the pattern was applied with incredible precision. But the most remarkable thing was its magnetic properties. It rotated counterclockwise when people put the magnet next to its northern part. When they left the magnet near the southern side, the stone turned in the other direction. Computed tomography and X-rays showed that there hadn't been any elements inside the stone that could cause rotation. It was just a smooth piece of rock. But was the Roswell rock really part of a spaceship? To answer this question, we need to move to England, the year 1976. An artist named Doug Bauer met his friend Dave Corley and invited him to create an impressive performance. At that time, people only learned about strange patterns in the fields from some books and records. And of course, none of these cases had been confirmed. The two friends understood that all this was nothing more than myths. Therefore, they decided to draw a big pattern in a wheat field in Wiltshire. Now, they didn't expect this drawing to become so popular. Many newspapers began to write about mysterious circles. Hundreds of reporters filmed it on their cameras, and people watching TV were shocked. From that moment on, crop circles became a cultural phenomenon. People mixed facts with fiction and created more and more unbelievable legends. Someone said that they had seen mysterious lights in the sky above the circles. In any case, those two friends continued to draw patterns and revealed their secret only in 2009. They also created the mysterious drawing in Chiselton, but that Roswell rock wasn't their job. Anyway, they said that the stone was also a fake. Other artists could draw the same pattern on the rock using stone-cutting equipment. One of the most mysterious books in the world is the Voynich manuscript. Nobody knows who its author was, but they wrote it in the 15th century. No one can understand the contents of this manuscript, consisting of 240 pages, for more than 500 years. Now, just imagine all the words were written in hand in an unknown language. Almost every page is decorated with strange images of female figures and weird unknown plants. The book was first discovered in 1912 and immediately became a cultural phenomenon. Many scientists, polyglots, and historians have tried to decipher the language and understand its meaning. They put it on the internet so everyone could try to solve the mystery. And it seems that Nicholas Gibbs, a historian and writer, managed to do this. He spent many years studying medieval Latin language and literature. Gibbs noticed the manuscript contained Latin abbreviations often used in medieval medical papers and reference books. Gibbs even found out that the book was a plagiarism of other older medical reference works. He compared the Voynich manuscript with other Latin books and found many similar words. Gibbs claimed that the manuscript was dedicated to women's health, and the mysterious flowers were real herbs and plants. But it wasn't that simple. Nicholas Gibbs was one of many who put forward the theory. Many scientists recognize his version as banal and unconvincing. Other decoders claim that some secret code was used in the manuscript. Some were sure it was written by Dominican nuns. Others described it as a reference book on astrology and herbs. Anyway, you can find scans of the manuscript in high resolution on the internet and try to crack the code yourself. Imagine that you're walking around New York and entering a dark, deserted alley. Then you see some canvas with a beautiful picture on it lying in a trash can. You don't really understand what exactly is depicted there, but you still feel some power of art emanating from it. You take the painting home and hang it on the wall. It's been hanging there almost 4 years. Then you publish a photo with the painting on the website with Antiques and discover that this picture is a missing masterpiece worth $1 million. This is a real story that happened to a New Yorker in 2003. Famous Mexican artist Rufino Tamayo painted this picture called Three People in 1970. One collector bought it as a gift for his wife, but in 1989, someone stole the work while they were moving to a new house. It was possible that the thief didn't appreciate this piece of art or couldn't find a buyer, so they threw it into the nearest trash can. The woman who found it returned the work to the owner and received a $15,000 reward. Expensive paintings often end up in trash cans. Van Gogh gave his works to various people, but they didn't take them seriously at that time. When these paintings were found many years later, they were estimated at tens of millions of dollars. For example, the artist gave his doctor his portrait. The doctor was horrified by the painting. Perhaps he didn't like the red shade of the hair. He gave the portrait to his mother, and she found a use for it. She covered the hole in her chicken coop with the picture. For more than 10 years, chickens had been running under the work of art. Then another artist found the painting. He paid the doctor pennies for it. Now it's estimated at $50 million. A similar case with a discarded work of art occurred in Italy. A gardener who worked at the Ricciardi Gallery of Modern Art was removing ivy from the building's walls and found a rusty metal door in the thicket. He opened it and got into a dark room. There was a garbage bag lying there. The gardener wanted to throw it in the trash, but decided to look inside first. And he found the lost work of famous artist Gustav Klimt. During the renovation of the gallery in 1997, someone stole the painting, Portrait of a Lady. It turned out that the thief had never taken it out of the building. Its value is estimated at $66 million. In 1901, collectors of sea sponges discovered a mysterious chest in the sea near Greece. There was a strange object inside, similar to a mechanical watch and the size of a shoebox. The finding attracted the attention of archaeologists. They quickly established that this item was created in ancient Greece about 2,200 years ago. They called it the Antikythera mechanism. Now it's in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens. Scientists have found out that this object is only 82 fragments, 1/3 of the original mechanism. It's still unknown who created it and how it works, but experts think it was a mechanical computer with bronze gears and other parts. People used it for astronomical calculations. The device could track the movements of the Sun, the Moon, and 5 planets of the solar system. Experts are still trying to figure out all the properties of this machine. It's considered to be the oldest computer on Earth. It proves that the level of technology 2,000 years ago was much higher than we could imagine. You know, there are many doors all around the world that have no keys. Maybe you can guess how to open them. The first destination is, read this, and good luck to you. It's a temple in India. The temple's name comes from this other really long word, which can be translated as the one emerging from the lotus. This temple is one of India's most popular and sacred places. It's one of 108 temples of this word. It dates way back. It was mentioned in Tamil literature in the 6th century. Flash forward to our time. In 2011, the Indian Supreme Court decided to document the valuables of the temple because they had been informed that the place might have been misused. To do so, they had to open the doors that had been closed for centuries. The committee went to the temple and discovered 6 huge secret vaults that held unbelievable treasures. After the chamber doors opened, they found at least $22 billion worth of golden idols, necklaces, and coins. The officials also discovered ceremonial costumes and gold coconut shells with jewels. Plus, they saw large diamonds. Not our understanding of large, though. Some of these precious stones were as large as 110 carats. To put it in perspective, A small solid gold statue from the collection could be worth around $30 million. After this fairy tale-ish treasure had been discovered, the temple got equipped with metal detectors, cameras, and other safety precautions before the first visitors started to arrive. Now, there are a lot of security guards at the temple. But are they protecting the treasure, or is there something more mysterious hiding behind its doors? The temple has 6 chambers, and the valuables are kept there. These rooms are named Chambers A through F. The expedition committee opened 5 of these vaults with significant effort. But the most bizarre thing is that, despite all the efforts involving existing tech, the mysterious Chamber B still wouldn't open. On the side of the door, 2 carved cobras are welcoming you. The door works as a gate. You can easily see it with the unaided eye, just like the doors leading to other chambers. Surprise! Experts discovered 2 more doors behind the first one. The second door is wooden, and the last one is made of iron. Strangely, the last door was sealed. It also doesn't have any means of entry, no bolts, handles, latches, or anything else. To this day, no one knows what's inside Chamber B. Believers say that opening the door against its will can release into the world unnamable things. Others say that Chamber B may hide a tunnel. It might not be related to the reasons above, but the High Court of India warned against opening the doors of Chamber B. Now, in 2010, David Crespi, a French engineer, visited Machu Picchu. He discovered a strange door in one of the main buildings. The door was in a narrow path neither tourists nor archaeologists used very often. David believed that the place was an entrance the Incas had sealed for some reason. He contacted archaeologists and authorities right away. They promised him to start investigating the area in the near future and let him know about his potential discovery. Well, months passed, but he didn't get any news. No response to his emails and calls. In 2011, he found an article by Terry Jameen about Peru. David reached out to him in no time. He described his finding to Jameen. After that, Jameen and other archaeologists went to Machu Picchu to investigate the secret door. They concluded that this door was indeed an entrance sealed by the Incas. The researchers confirmed the existence of 2 entrances found behind the famous door. They also got the 3D representation of a staircase leading to the main room and another chamber. The analysis also revealed several cavities, among which there was a vast quadrangular room. Plus, georadars detected some metals. Those might be golden and silver objects. Jameen and his team thought this place was a chamber of pre-Hispanic times. They believed the door had been sealed by the Incas to hide something important. Maybe an enormous treasure, or something no less precious. Jameen also claimed that finding this chamber could lead to the discovery of a mausoleum. Jameen submitted an official request to the Peruvian authorities for permission to open the chambers. Yet, neither his application nor requests of other archaeologists have been approved so far. Authorities claim that opening this door could cause damage on the other sides of the archaeological site. Yet, the use of an endoscopic camera has confirmed the hypothesis that the stone blocks at the entrance are only there to close the passage. They are not there to support the internal structures of the building. The third mystery is in Giza, Egypt. Explorers uncovered 2 secret doors inside the Great Pyramid. There are 2 tunnels, each around 8 inches wide, that go from the north and south walls of the Queen's Chamber. But the tunnels are closed by stone blocks before they reach the outside of the pyramid. So, where are they leading to? No one really knows the true purpose of these tunnels. Some archaeologists think these doors might be hiding a yet undiscovered chamber. Egyptologist Zahi Hawass explained how these doors were first found. A robot designed for this expedition was sent inside the shafts of the Queen's Chamber to find out what was there. The research team attached a camera to the robot. The footage revealed that behind the stone door, there was another sealed door. The archaeologists were thrilled to see this door instead of just a dead end. The structure of the stone door blocks the other doors perfectly. Experts think it's an incredible bit of engineering. Now, it's not possible to reach the door because it's behind a huge stone block. But archaeologists are trying to find a way to get there without damaging other parts of the structure. These new discoveries have only raised more questions instead of answering the already existing ones. Secrets are still waiting to be revealed. Our final stop is the Taj Mahal, a monument to love. Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan made this memorial to honor the memory of his beloved wife, Mumtaz Mahal. The total number of doors in the Taj Mahal is so great, this video would be days long if we started talking about all the sealed rooms. Experts think that if someone opened these doors after they've been closed for so long, it'd release carbon monoxide. And when this gas meets the marble, it forms calcium carbonate. That's why this could lead to the appearance of cracks in the minarets of the Taj Mahal. Also, a legend says that if these doors get open, a dreadful curse will be unleashed from the mausoleum's underground chambers. And here's a bonus from Canada: the door of room 873. This is a room at the Fairmont Banff Springs Hotel, which opened in 1888. The story goes like this. Decades ago, someone committed a crime in this room. After the investigation, the hotel administration refurbished the room and rented it out to other travelers. But rumor has it, other guests who stayed in the room later also faced unpleasant situations. They reported hearing strange noises. The TV in the room kept flickering. It's guessed that the door of room 873 was sealed with bricks. Curious guests who heard these mysterious stories wander along the corridor where the room used to be and knock on the walls to contact potential ghosts. Well, which of these secret doors would you like to open?
They used to call this island the Paris of the East, mostly because it had beautiful buildings with large gardens and impressive stone archways. But now, it's nothing like it used to be, with all the architecture almost entirely covered in tree roots and vines. Ross Island is a small territory in the Indian Ocean. It's located east of the Indian city of Port Blair. Though initially thought of as a jail, Ross Island eventually became a luxurious resort for the local administrators. They called this island a real treat for its more privileged residents. It boasted opulent bungalows, stained glass window panels brought all the way from Italy, neatly kept gardens, tennis courts, and even swimming pools. Soon after the complex was closed in 1937, a powerful earthquake hit the island. It caused a lot of damage, making it even more uninhabitable. The island is now in the administration of India and has become a tourist attraction for people interested in abandoned towns. Pieces of German architecture still lie hidden in the Namibian desert. The city of Kolmanskop, Namibia, was a luxury location at its peak in the early 1900s when German workers settled here looking for diamonds. This abandoned town used to have everything from a ballroom to a hospital and even a bowling alley. It all started to decline somewhere in the late 1910s when another diamond-packed location was found nearby. So, most of the people living here moved, leaving everything behind in search of more money. Kolmanskop has since been slowly occupied by sand dunes, while the hot temperature and low moisture help to preserve the buildings. This ghost town is also available for visitors. If it sounds interesting, you can book a tour in the nearby town of Lüderitz. Another abandoned castle dominates the view in Krakow, a city in Italy. The whole village sits atop a cliff that's 1,312 feet high. The founders liked this location since they knew it would be easy to defend themselves from unwanted guests. But the castle, built in the 1300s, soon became overwhelmed by landslides and earthquakes. Even though it has no residents anymore, the medieval city often comes alive during the various local festivals that take place here in the summer months. The locals also offer tours and tell amazing stories about the location. One of the highlights of the tour is a statue that seemingly came out of nowhere and now lies in a body of water. Hidden away in the Montana mountains, Garnet Ghost Town tells the well-known American story of the West's gold rush. The town's history goes back to the 1890s, when they found a lot of gold in the Nancy Hanks mine. During its glory days, Garnet had almost 1,000 residents. Even though it's in a relatively secluded location, it had saloons, hotels, stores, a school, and other features of a regular little town. In 1905, when most of the gold had already been taken away, most mines were left behind, so only a couple of hundred residents stayed in Garnet. The final straw came in 1912, when a fire damaged most of the town's buildings. So, by the 1940s, Garnet was completely abandoned. It soon became a hotspot for treasure hunters looking for furnishings and artifacts. That was until a preservation campaign started in the 1970s. It ended with the town being declared a historic district in 2010. To this day, Garnet is one of the best preserved ghost towns in the area. Hashima Island is another abandoned location that tells us that when people leave, nature takes over. This mysterious place was even featured in a James Bond movie because of its ghostly landscape. It used to be a well-known spot in Japan for undersea coal mines, as it was opened in 1881. In 1959, at its peak, there were over 5,000 people living here, including mine workers and their families. As soon as the mines started going dry, sometime in 1970, people started to slowly depart the island, leaving it completely abandoned in 3 months. Even though nobody lives there these days, there are a lot of tourists here that drop off to wander around the abandoned homes, swimming pools, stores, and factories. Another town that started with a mining company back in 1881 is Calico, California. People discovered the location was packed with silver, so it soon became home to over 500 silver mines and 3,000 residents. It used to feature hotels, general stores, restaurants, and a school. There was even a local newspaper printed here called the Calico Print. But by 1986, the town had become empty. One of the former locals decided to buy it and began its restoration, making it a registered historical landmark. It even has a museum of the Old West available for tourists. One of the most interesting attractions that were rebuilt is the 1-mile-long Calico and Odessa Railroad. It currently goes through the steep canyons and hills, and even passes the old mines and buildings north of Calico. Approximately 1/3 of the town is original, while the rest consists of newer buildings that are replicas meant to recreate the spirit of its past. If you're a fan of cars, you might have heard of Henry Ford as the famous American industrialist who founded the Ford Motor Company in 1903. But in 1927, he began working on another one of his ambitious dreams, Fordlandia. It was supposed to be a massive rubber plantation located near the Tapajos River in Brazil, since he needed a reliable source of rubber for his car tires and hoses. His vision was to design a town complete with swimming pools, a golf course, living bungalows, and even weekly square dancing sessions for the locals. This project was unfortunate to begin with, since the local rubber trees soon got infected with leaf fungus. Even though Henry Ford invested a staggering $20 million into this potential income source, the town failed to produce the needed rubber. He had nothing left to do but to sell it to Brazil in 1945, and soon it was completely abandoned. Many of its buildings are still standing, but have been taken over by the surrounding nature. You can still see curious tourists wandering through it to this day. During its glory days, Hampi was the second largest city in the world. Looking at its ruins today, it's hard to imagine this Indian city used to be filled with temples and bazaars, and that it served as an important center of the Mauryan Empire in the 14th and 15th centuries. It was destroyed in the 16th century, but it still has beautifully preserved forts and markets. It became part of the UNESCO World Heritage in 1986, aiming to protect its buildings, such as the Lotus Mahal, a stone structure that was carved to resemble a lotus flower opening to the sun. A tourist village was constructed back in 1920 along the shore of Epicuén, a salt lake about 370 miles southwest of Buenos Aires in Argentina. It was designed to provide people with a busy city life a breath of fresh air near the restorative salt waters of the nearby lake. It was soon equipped with a railroad station and ended up having a population of more than 5,000 residents. The project was also destined to fail soon enough, as the unusual amount of rain at that time caused Lake Epicuan to swell. In 1985, the water took over the local dam, and the town was flooded. The waters were so deep that they even reached a depth of 33 feet in 1993. They only began to recede in 2009 and left behind the remaining buildings, literally encrusted in salt. No one came back to the town except for Pablo Novak, who returned here back in 2012 and was the only resident of Villa Epicuan at the time. You've just reached your perfect spot on a deserted beach. It's so quiet here that you start to doze off. But as you open your eyes, you are shocked. Wait a minute, is that an actual house that's just been washed up on the shore? It may sound like the beginning of a sci-fi novel, but not if you live near this beach in El Salvador. There's a mysteriously abandoned house there that looks as if it's just been washed ashore. How did this villa end up there? How long has it been here without anyone noticing it? This mysterious construction is 46 miles south of El Salvador's capital, San Salvador. Locals say the building used to be a hotel called Puerto Ventura. At the time it was built, its main attraction was the fact that it was really close to the sea. Unfortunately, the engineering behind it wasn't well planned out, all because locals didn't need any official permission to start the construction. The hotel was too close to the water and dangerously exposed to the elements. The Roman-style villa is now a mere 50 feet from the edge of the sea when the tide is low. It can only be accessed in the morning because later, the tides fill the first floor with salt water. What's now left of the hotel looks like the ruins of a two-story house. The front part is very impressive, with Roman-type pillars. It also has wide windows on the second floor. You can still see parts of the iron structures and remains of what used to be the gateway to the second floor. There are some bleachers at the top of the building. They're sometimes used by tourists. More and more people are now browsing the area, taking photos, even though the building is obviously not safe for climbing. There's little information on how long it's been sitting in its current location, but some locals say it's been there for at least 20 years. It had remained a local secret for years before it was discovered by a TikTok user in 2021. But that doesn't answer the question, how did the hotel end up in another location altogether? This is where things become a little fuzzy. While some locals say that the building was abandoned decades ago, others claim it was deserted after Hurricane Mitch hit the area back in 1998. Hurricane Mitch was one of the most dangerous weather phenomena to ever hit Central America. During the storm, the winds traveled at 178 miles per hour, and the hurricane itself lasted for about 15 hours. It was also the cause of a huge amount of rainfall, which resulted in floods and many dangerous landslides. Being built so close to the shoreline, the former hotel had little chance of surviving the extreme weather conditions, so it must have been literally displaced. After sitting under the sun, you might start dreaming of some snowballs getting washed ashore, to even out the temperature. I'm not kidding. This strange natural phenomenon did happen back in 2016. It resulted in about 11 miles of the coast of the Gulf of Ob in West Siberia getting covered with huge snowballs. Because of the low temperatures, small pieces of ice started to form in the water. Afterward, the wind and waves rolled them into giant snowballs. Some of them were the size of a tennis ball, but others were up to 3 feet wide. A 2004 Harley-Davidson night train motorcycle popped up ashore on a British Columbia beach back in 2012. It was neatly packed inside a shipping container. It took some time to do it, but the owner was eventually traced down. His name was Ikuyo Yokoyama, and he lost his motorcycle after a tsunami struck Japan on March 11, 2011. To get to its final destination, the Harley-Davidson traveled more than 4,000 miles. To celebrate its long journey, Yokoyama donated the bike to the Harley-Davidson Museum in Milwaukee. It's been on display there ever since, in case you want to visit. This strange phenomenon made it look as if someone spilled dish soap all over the beach. But it does happen pretty often in Queensland. Sea foam covers the shore there a couple of times each year. It mostly happens after a storm, when ocean waves move dissolved organic matter around. It's basically like a giant ice cream maker. After Cyclone Debbie back in March of 2017, some beaches actually needed to be closed because of huge amounts of white foam. The wind even brought some of that foam to the nearby towns, making locals believe it was snowing. Would you be surprised to see a 6 by 6 foot rusty metal die washed ashore on your local beach? Because back in 2017, people in Coeur d'Alene in Idaho sure were. It turned out to be an old storage tank. Someone decided to spice it up a bit by adding some white spots to make it look like a die. In 1992, thousands of rubber duckies got stranded at sea after a large container ship that was transporting them was hit by a wave. As you can imagine, the ducks started popping up all over the world, in Hawaii, Alaska, South America, Australia, in Europe, and even in the Arctic. It's estimated that a couple hundred of those unlucky rubber ducks are still out there. Interestingly, they turned out to be very useful to scientists. Based on their movements, researchers can monitor the direction of water currents. If you happen to like dinosaurs, you'll be happy to know sea waters can also bring ashore some fossils. In 2018, a large dinosaur jawbone ended up on the coast of Lilstock Beach in Somerset, England. It used to belong to a dinosaur called Ichthyosaurus. Thanks to this finding, scientists were able to make an impressive discovery. Before, they thought the Ichthyosaurus could reach a maximum length of about 69 feet. But after they studied the jawbone, they ended up recalculating the creature's size. They concluded that the Ichthyosaurus could grow up to 85 feet. The megalodon was the largest predator in our planet's history. It lived almost all over the globe, except near the poles. How do we know that? Because megalodon teeth keep appearing on beaches every now and then. One staggering megalodon tooth, which was way over 20 inches long, was discovered in a river in Croatia. Since these creatures have been extinct for about 3 million years, their teeth are highly prized by fossil hunters. A giant Lego man that washed ashore is something I never thought I'd hear about. And it turns out it didn't happen just once. There were 4 of these giant Lego men in total, each around 8 feet tall. One was found in England and one in the Netherlands, while the other 2 popped up in Florida and California. It was surely not a coincidence, and after some research, people found out that a Dutch artist was behind this. Ego Leonard started this project as a personal statement campaign. A short film was even made about this, and it was called No Real Than You Are. This sentence was written on each of the 4 Lego men put to sea. A bundle of over 50 letters was washed ashore in New Jersey on a beach in Atlantic Highlands back in 2012. It happened shortly after Hurricane Sandy had struck the area. A 14-year-old boy found the letters and gave them to his mom. She was so touched by them that she decided to carefully dry and return them to their owner. The letters were the correspondence of 2 people named Dorothy and Lynn. They were dated between 1942 and 1948. The last was written a week before their wedding. With the help of an online genealogy site, the woman reached Dorothy and returned the letters to the 88-year-old woman who was living in a retirement home.
You go for a hike in the steep mountains of Mammoth Lakes, California. The terrain is rugged and difficult. The icy snow makes it harder to walk. Halfway along the hike, you spot something out of the ordinary. From a distance, you spot scattered stuff lying on the rocky ground. You walk a little closer to have a clearer look and see what appears to be the remains of an airplane. It turns out that the debris belonged to record-breaking pilot Steve Faucet. Authorities had been looking for him for almost a year. No one could find him and explain what caused his plane to crash. It seemed like such an easy flight for an experienced pilot. So what could have happened to him? You see, years before this tragic event, Faucet was attempting a much riskier feat. He was trying to be the first pilot to fly around the world solo in a hot air balloon. Now, can you imagine spending 2 weeks in a tiny container just to break a world record? If you're wondering, here's what you'll need to fly around the globe: a sound navigation system, a wealthy sponsor, and tireless endurance. Even though balloons are the oldest flying vehicle, no one until Faucet managed to fly around the world with them, and it sure wasn't a breeze. It's day 1 of Faucet's second attempt to fly around the world in a balloon. The year is 1997, and an anxious crowd gathers in St. Louis, waiting for Faucet's takeoff. The pilot walks into the stadium with a big smile. He certainly doesn't look the part of an adventurer trying to achieve the impossible. But this is the trip of his life. To prepare, he trained to acclimatize himself to an altitude of 12,000 feet. The conditions are harsh. He's flying in an unpressurized cabin and in between the clouds. It seems unlikely he'll make it all the way, but there he goes. The balloon launches into the air. The crowd beneath is cheering and waving him goodbye. The wind of about 5 knots allows the balloon to launch. On the first night, one of his heaters breaks. It is freezing outside the cabin, but he gets through the night. Faucet's secret weapon is the world's first balloon autopilot. It gets lonely up there, and the constant need to focus makes one very soon tired. At night, he turns on the autopilot to get some sleep. It fires the burners in a computer-programmed sequence and keeps the balloon on the flight path. Faucet needs to wake up and operate the burners to change the altitude. After 3 days, a first victory, he has flown across the Atlantic Ocean. He flies solo, but a team accompanies him on the ground. They communicate mostly through email sent via satellite. At the end of the first week, the Mission Control Center receives an alarming email from Faucet. Dark clouds are mounting on the horizon. It looks like the weather is turning against him. He can see the thunderstorm from the balloon, but there is no way to predict how strong it is. Faucet is determined to fly through the clouds despite the risks. He is flying at 1,000 feet above the ground with no visibility. Somehow, he makes it through. His flight continues through Libya, Iran, and India. It looks like nothing will stop him now, but he is already exhausted. He is uncertain how much longer he can keep going. Inside the balloon, the meals are small rations, and he uses a bucket as a toilet. Unfortunately, he has lost a lot of fuel while crossing the Atlantic. Halfway through India, the balloon crashes into a tree. He flew an astounding 9,600 miles from St. Louis until his landing spot. Steve didn't achieve his goal, but he won't give up. To finally be successful, Faucet needs to change his strategy. His new plan is to fly over the southern hemisphere. It was the first time anyone would ever try that. His idea is simple. In the southern part of the globe, he would fly mostly over water. This would help him fly faster, as he would only need flight permission from 5 countries along the way. If you were on the ground as Faucet flew by, maybe you wondered what that flying object in the sky was. As he flew over Cape Town in South Africa, over 50 people reported seeing strange flying objects. Sorry to disappoint your fantasy folks, but it was just Steve Faucet and his balloon. His first attempt to fly around the world through the southern hemisphere almost worked out. He got lucky. When he reached Australia, he caught a jet stream that helped him speed up to about 115 knots. That's 3 times the speed of a gazelle. Morale was high as Faucet had already broken his distance record by flying over 13,500 miles. Under his feet, the beautiful Australian landscape is filled with deserts and dry lakes. He crossed the Australian coast at 8:22 p.m. local time, and his next expected landfall was in Chile, over 7,500 miles away. But again, a huge thunderstorm got in his way. After entering the storm, the balloon showed how fragile it was. The lightning and fierce winds tore the balloon apart. This time, he wouldn't make it through. He fell into the ocean as the balloon caught fire. A rescue team waited until morning to go look for Faucet. A Hercules aircraft rescued him from open waters. In his 6th attempt, Faucet made it around the world in a hot air balloon. The Spirit of Freedom balloon landed in Queensland, Australia, after a 2-week flight across the globe. He flew at speeds of over 200 miles per hour and journeyed over 19,263 miles. Faucet had done it. He was the first solo pilot to cross the world in a balloon. However, he didn't stop there. Soon after breaking this world record, he wanted to do the same on a different vehicle. He convinced Richard Branson, the owner of Virgin Atlantic, to fund a single jet-powered aircraft, later called the Virgin Atlantic Global Flyer. On the 8th of February 2005, the Global Flyer took off. It set out to circumnavigate the Tropic of Cancer, an incredible length of around 23,000 miles. Out of luck, or sheer ingenuity, Faucet broke yet another world record. He overcame a major fuel loss early on in the flight and made it all the way back to Salina in Kansas, where he originally departed from. Did this story make you want to hop on a hot air balloon? Faucet was the expert in aerial adventures and extreme conditions. This is why his disappearance in the Sierra Nevada mountains was full of mystery. What could have happened to take down such an experienced pilot? On the 3rd of September 2007, Faucet took off from a Nevada ranch with this single-engine plane named Super Decathlon. It was a simple, leisurely day flight that took a dark turn. Faucet never made it back to the ranch. A search and rescue team was sent to find the pilot and his plane, but they returned empty-handed. It wasn't until a year later that a hiker found some of Faucet's belongings near Mammoth Lakes. Then an aerial search located the remains of Faucet's two-seater at an elevation of 10,000 feet. The mystery was solved with the help of advanced technology. In the world's first hexagonal wind tunnel facility, experts recreated the weather conditions of the day of Faucet's flight. They were trying to understand if the downdrafts from the Sierra Nevada mountains could have brought his plane to the ground. With the help of a smaller plane replica, they made a disturbing discovery. That day, visibility was normal, but the wind currents swelled the plane like a leaf. A sudden downdraft most likely disoriented Faucet and made him lose control of the aircraft, causing him to crash directly into the mountains. The plane's engine wasn't powerful enough to overcome the wind forcing it into the ground. It turns out it was entirely out of Faucet's control. The discovery of the debris brought closure to this unfortunate case. Wow, talk about noisy! Toadfish have a unique ability. They can create a very strong sound. The human ear usually can't hear it, especially if only one fish is making the sound. But if many fish are making the sound at the same time, well, it's going to be hard to forget, and you may not be able to stop hearing it. Toadfish are a common part of the fauna off the coast of Sausalito in California, and every year thousands of them gather in the shoals to party and scream. Together, they create a collective sound that can be easily heard by those in the houses near the shore. The noise, which can be described as a low hum, can even penetrate into the city center. Some people get bothered by this constant humming. This is a unique natural phenomenon, but there's a catch. At some point, the fish swim away from the shore, but the sound remains. Also, scientists have proven that this fish-made noise can't spread through the city, and many residents of the coastal areas don't hear it. But still, some people continue to hear this strange hum. In a similar case, imagine that you've moved to a small village in Scotland. You rent a house, have dinner, and go to bed. As you're settling into sleep, a strange hum permeates your room. It sounds like someone started their truck somewhere in the distance. The sound is similar to the sound of a low, loud bass that comes from a speaker. The hum keeps you awake. You get migraines and even feel nauseous. In the morning, you find out that some other locals also hear this terrible buzzing. They tell you about a huge factory located nearby. Machines, engines, steam boilers, big air vents, and generators emit a loud, heavy hum that passes through the air. Sound waves spread throughout the village and annoy people with a sharp sense of hearing. You've been hearing this sound for several days and suffering from insomnia. Then, one day, the factory goes bankrupt. All the workers leave their positions and turn off all the engines and fans. Great, you'll finally sleep in peace. But you know what? The sound doesn't disappear. It follows you wherever you are. And it's not about the factory or the fish or the truck engine. Imagine that you're walking down the streets of a small English town. There are a lot of planes flying right above you. The hum they make follows you. Even in bed you can hear it. You wonder if there's an airport nearby. You ask the locals and find out there's not even a runway here. But where does the sound come from? You raise your head to look up and see a clear sky. There are no planes, but there's noise. And you're not the only one who hears it. Some locals are sure that the hum comes from high-speed traffic on the highway. Thousands of cars drive in two directions and leave massive sound waves behind. But at night, there are no cars there, and the sound remains. Maybe you're going mad. People's stories about the hum save you from this madness, and it's not just the residents of this town that know about it. About 4% of people on the planet hear the hum. Strangers tell each other about the hum that prevents them from sleeping and concentrating on something. The sound follows them everywhere and doesn't stop. Some people hear it in certain places, so they move to other cities. Maybe you're hearing it right now and not paying attention. But be careful. If you recognize it once, you won't be able to stop hearing it. There's a website and a forum on the internet dedicated to the hum. People from all over the world put geolocations in places where they heard this mysterious phenomenon. You can find thousands of these coordinates on the site and even add your own. People describe different levels of noise and share their sources. Some theories say that the hum is the sound of our planet coming from the core. Someone else is sure that it comes from the atmosphere. Scientists have even been consulted, but they also don't know the reason for this phenomenon. People use high-frequency microphones and amplifiers to record the hum. Almost everywhere, they detect a low-frequency vibration that is practically impossible for the human ear to catch. It mixes with the sound of cars, printers in the office, and subway trains. Sometimes people stop hearing it, but the hum increases when they lie in bed. Many records about the hum say that people hear it in industrial cities. Sometimes these sound seekers manage to find the source. They ended up being factories with running generators where the sound was getting into the ventilation system and where the fans spread it outside the building. When the generator stopped working, the sound disappeared. But these are rare cases. More often, no one can find the source of hum. One of the most famous places where you can catch it is in the city of Taos in New Mexico. About 2% of locals hear a strange buzzing every day. Some tourists experience it too. Scientists came to the city to study this mystery, but found no explanation. Some theories say the usual acoustics of this place cause the hum. Some folks think it's just a hallucination or the power of suggestion. Everyone talks so much about the hum that the brain creates an illusion of a sound that doesn't exist. Locals believe the nature of the buzzing is mystical and associated with bad spirits. Whatever it is, no one has found out the truth yet. The hum that people hear all over the world may be the result of seismic activity in the tectonic plates under the ocean waters. Huge chunks of the Earth's crust are slowly moving and colliding with each other. This creates a noise that reaches us in the form of a hum. But why do only a few people hear it? Perhaps about 4% of the world's population has a unique sense of hearing. In any case, scientists haven't been able to confirm the tectonic plate theory either. Some researchers point to submarines as the reason. They use low-frequency radio signals to communicate around the world. These signals spread over the surface and can affect the human body. When the ear catches these sound waves, it reacts and causes vibrations similar to humming. This happens because low-frequency sound energy collides with the soft tissues of the skull and stimulates the auditory nerve. In fact, it's not even a sound. It's a hallucination that is created by your brain. But still, no one can confirm this theory either. Perhaps thunderstorms can create the hum phenomenon. About 8 million lightning strikes hit the Earth every day. Some impact creates a powerful electromagnetic charge. Lightning penetrates the air and makes it resonate between the Earth's surface and the ionosphere. Yeah, it sounds complicated, but the principle is simple. Imagine that you're blowing onto the neck of a bottle. Hear this low hum? Lightning works similarly with air. And that's just one hit. Imagine millions of these strikes. The sound waves spread all over the planet, and some people hear them. Lightning constantly strikes all the time, so the hum never stops. In 1973, scientists put forward a theory that the reason for the hum is the jet stream shearing against slower-moving air. In simple words, wind and fast air flows intersect slower ones. As a result, a whistling sound appears, and electric towers and power lines amplify it. By the way, the first reports of the hum appeared in the 70s. People learned about this phenomenon from the small British city of Bristol. Dozens of residents heard this strange noise in different parts of the town. In the beginning, they ignored it. Then the sound became increasingly more irritable. It prevented people from working and living their everyday lives. They couldn't sleep and couldn't concentrate on anything. There was a warehouse with industrial fans in a neighboring town. The locals were sure that this was the reason for the hum. The warehouse stopped working a few years later, but the sound remained. You may even be able to hear it right now if you visit the city. There are many theories about the hum, but you can reduce almost half of them thanks to one factor. Tectonic plates, seismic activity, lightning strikes, the Earth's crust, and resonating air are logical explanations. But look at all the records about the noise. People hadn't mentioned this until the 70s. If this phenomenon had appeared earlier, many newspapers would have written about it. Apparently, the hum is not a mystery of nature. Perhaps this is a consequence of all of our technological achievements. Factories, power lines, airplanes, cars, ships, trains, microwaves, and generators create an imperceptible background noise that most people ignore. We're so used to all these noises that we have forgotten what silence is. Perhaps our brain made the hum inside our heads to respond to our noisy world. If you start to listen carefully right now, what kind of sounds will you hear? Where are they coming from? And is there the hum among them? That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and stay on the bright side.